All right, calling to order the September 6th, 2022 meeting of the Manchester Essex Regional School District. First up, we have public comment. If anyone from paying attention online would like to make a public comment, please put your name and address in the chat so that we can see you. We don't have anyone in the room with us currently. I can't see the chat. But...
Nothing in the chat yet. Again, public comment, name and address in the chat if you'd like to share something.
No? Okay. Seeing none, we will close the chat feature and close public comment. For our chairman's report, before we go any further, I'd like to welcome Maria Schmidt as our new school committee secretary. We thank you for being here. Big shoes to fill with Gail, but we're sure you're up to the task, so thank you. Would you like to introduce yourself very briefly?
Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Schmidt, a longtime resident and put a couple kids all the way through. I'm all out of them now. So I'm happy to be here and join the team and be part of something that's bigger than just one little school and one little family. So thank you for welcoming me, and I look forward to learning, and I appreciate your patience in advance.
Thank you very, very much. For my chairman's report tonight, just a couple piece of information. Since we last met, I was able to represent our committee at two events. The first was the new staff training day. They actually have 3 days of it, I believe, but I was here for the first day, and that was really exciting to see some of the new teachers and staff and meet them. And then also at the faculty and staff all together meeting last Tuesday, followed by a presentation from Michael Eatman, which I was able to stay and participate in. And that was really wonderful, first of all, to see all of the staff together, and also to be part of that presentation and get the experience for myself to see how he's presenting the work that we have moving forward. So that was really wonderful. We have a slightly different meeting tonight than last time we met together. First of all, we were virtual. And second of all, we had a more traditional business meeting. We had a presentation, a thing to discuss and vote on, and it was a traditional meeting. Tonight, we're taking on some of the work that we would have accomplished at our workshop in August. So it'll be slightly different, but as long as we are still moving forward with our understanding of how to run the meeting effectively, efficiently, I think that we'll all be able to have our input included and move forward very well. For our new members, we're into the school year now. Give it a few meetings and you will know a lot more. You will understand a lot more, see the big picture a whole lot better, I promise. On a 3-year term, we have a year of learning, a year of doing, and a year of training, right? In a 3-year term. So just keep in mind, you're not expected to know everything, and learning through experience is a big part of this job. So thank you for engaging. And that's it for my chairman's report tonight. For the consent agenda, I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda, which includes warrants for fiscal year 22, number 1080, fiscal year 23, numbers 1009 and 1010. There are no minutes in this consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I'll just offer that in onboarding Maria, we had a great meeting with Gail. And we talked about getting caught up on some of the back meetings. As you know, Gail serves as the recording secretary to 2 large boards in town who have been inundated. So she's working through recordings. We know we have recordings for each of those meetings. So there's a published record of what was said and done in the motions that were made and approved. And we should have that all wrapped up by mid-fall, we hope. So just she wanted me to let you know she was working on things.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please thank her for us.
Yep.
Subcommittee reports, elementary facilities, Matt? No report. We have not met. Finance subcommittee, Anna, we have not met yet, but we're meeting next week. Policy subcommittee has not met. Negotiations.
So, sure, yeah.
There's really no update. We met the 18th, and we are meeting again next. And session, everyone's back in the building, so we will.
Right. Thank you very much. Superintendent's report.
Sure, I am of course trying to get my little PowerPoint ready to go. Let's see if it lets me share it. If not, we won't hold up. Is this in the package? Maybe. Nope, it was just, I just throw notes on a slide for tonight, but if it's gonna be more trouble than it's worth, we will not do it that way. The goal was not to be doing two things at once. Okay, that should do it. Right. As I said before, opening of school was very upbeat and smooth. All buildings reported very smooth starts to the year. We were a little worried about the traffic. I'm sure it's been an obstacle for people and an annoyance, but there hasn't been a whole lot of input around it. I think everybody was well aware that it was there and was planning ahead. So all systems are go. We only had 2 days. We get a lot of questions. The intent of the 2 days is to do basically get kids in, get them settled, allow people who may not be completely returned from their summer getaways to come back and make sure we're ready and able to kind of hit the ground running with a more focused approach this week. So this week, school will start to feel a little bit more like school and a little less like orientation, which is really how those 2 days are structured. As we opened school, it kind of got lost in the shuffle of last week, but we received some good news. The Boston Magazine usually puts out its best schools publication right at the beginning of the year. So we got word, I want to say it was Wednesday morning that we came in 4th this year in the best high schools rankings. There's a post that's up with a link to the methodology. They change it a little bit every year. I think they like to see some movement so that they can, sell some magazines. They have a vested interest, so they use the methodology that they choose to use. We have no input into it, and it's a combination of the various test scores and student teacher ratios, class sizes, and things of that nature. What they have done over the past few years is start to run columns which show the direct correlation between the socioeconomics of communities and communities that are very successful on these lists. So I think that's something we all acknowledge, that we are very lucky to have a community that can support schools and that our students come, for the most part, ready to learn and with a strong support system at home. So together, we try to work with all of those great inputs and add value to that. And I hope the rankings show that we are. It's just one, over the years, it's probably worth noting that we have kind of put them in their place. It's one marker of success. It's not the only marker of success, but it does show that we continue to compete with other like districts in terms of producing test scores. So we're going to take the win and we're very proud of it. And one thing that always needs to be said is the high school gets the recognition, but they don't arrive at the high school without a lot of collaborative work from K-8. So this really is a whole district achievement. Not to take anything away from the high school, they do a fantastic job, but it is the product of what we hope is becoming a better and better oiled machine to get kids through a systematized approach to curriculum and learning that lands them with their best chance for success after school, whatever they choose, whether it's college, military, or work. So we're excited. We're excited for the community, and it's a great way to start the year. A couple of things we did, we kind of start gearing up. The adults start gearing up about 2 weeks before. So Teresa mentioned participating in the 3-day orientation for new staff. That's a combination of both new teaching faculty as well as TAs, and it's everything from who's in the system, how do you navigate, getting your benefits, who do you call when you think you're going to be sick, to these are the expectations and this is the overarching theme and goal of our district, and here's how we expect you to help the team advance our strategic plan. Carrie Shaw is the mentor coordinator, so she worked in conjunction with Angela Bick, who's sitting in as our interim curriculum director, to organize the 3 days. She kind of acts as the host. She brings in the mentors at the back end of it so they can meet the person who's going to be their contact while they're here and help them get acclimated. Depending on where you are in your career, your mentor is either someone to help you learn the culture, or your mentor is someone who's helping you learn to teach. If you're a novice teacher by state regs, you have to go through an in-district mentor program where we provide multiple years of service and coaching to help you achieve your next level of status in certification. So we have people all over the map. In total, we have, to this point, because we still have a few more hires to make, about 30 new people split between 12 teaching faculty, about 14 TAs, and then we have the 3 new folks down in central office who are here as part of the reorganization. So all positions, it's a big number, but they're all either replacements for retirements or resignations or reorganizations. Some TAs moved into teaching positions. So that's where the head count's coming from. The teachers came back to prep for 2 days before the students arrived. And what we do with the teachers in those 2 days is similar to what they're doing with kids, which is kind of setting the tone for giving them some time to get in, get acclimated. In the case of Essex, one of our new hires was an interim elementary principal. So meeting your new principal, having the principals organize with staff on the first day. We do the first day in school. Many districts do the first day. The first thing you do is you come into an all district gathering. We had a hurricane a few years back that set us off our schedule. And we had put the all district gathering in the second day, and it kind of stuck. There's a little bit more of a relaxed feeling when the first thing you're doing is not going to a mass meeting where somebody's telling you how wonderful the year is going to be and this is what we expect you to do. So it kind of just worked out. And a few little things we added this year that we're really proud of is we had it at Memorial School because we have yet to have kind of an all district event there to celebrate the new school. And we were fortunate. We recruited some kids. The principals recruited a lot of kids. So we had some of the athletics teams who were here for preseason come and welcome all the teachers in. They kind of did like a receiving line, a tunnel. When they came into the building, we had a couple of kids come and do a little piano concert for us as we had our breakfast that was put on by the food service department. We had 2 middle school students. We do service awards at the beginning of the year just to honor the 15, 20, 25, and 30 year members of our staff. And they read, we use a poem. It's called The Starfish Story, and it's about a little boy relentlessly throwing starfish back into the ocean in an attempt to save them, in kind of a grouchy old, and some it's a man and some of it's a woman coming down the beach and saying, what are you bothering doing that for? And it's a story about perseverance and sticking with something, because you never know when your action will make a difference. And it's kind of the theme behind teaching. Sometimes it feels like you're pushing a rock up a hill. You're not necessarily seeing the benefits of your efforts, but you just don't know when you made a difference to that one. So we had 2 students read that to open it up, and wanted just to share that we gave a special recognition this year to Badula Plant, who received a Teacher of the Year award from the Legion for her above and beyond service to basically to education, but she has done a tremendous amount with working with the American Legion and really developing projects to honor the service members in this community. So that was a very well-deserved honor for her. And then Michael Eatman just helped us focus on 2 strategic priorities. They're kind of the cornerstone of everything we're going to do over the next few years, because it's about building our capacity around emotional intelligence, understanding the students and the adults that we work with. So Michael really helped us focus in and frame some of the work we'll do with him this year on the initiatives of integrating social emotional learning and celebrating and nurturing inclusiveness. So the theme of his work that morning was just building community, and the fact that it starts with individually committing to the work and committing to improving upon ourselves for all of us to be able to move together and work together in community going forward. So you probably saw on the improvement plan, he is scheduled to work with us too around that. And I was happy to have a conversation with Teresa after, and she felt she had a better understanding once you kind of see it in action and it stops being this person we're bringing in.
Yes.
I mean, he's really becoming part of our team, and his function is to coach us in becoming more emotionally intelligent, to kind of boil it down to a 2-word phrase. So we were super excited. He's a very inspirational person, and he really makes you feel like you can take it all on. So I think we walked out of there feeling like we have an exciting year ahead of us. And we purposely just kind of tabled any technical discussion about some of the challenges that we had for the year ahead. It was really focused on keeping students at the center of all that we do and what we need to do to improve ourselves in order to be more effective in our work. So that was kind of the exciting opener to the school year. I covered the hiring, and just because I wanted to let you know that we do have something going out to parents who may be inquiring about COVID protocols this year. We don't have any COVID protocols this year. We're really just using what DPH has published as kind of the guidelines people should follow. It's incumbent upon people to do so, and rule of thumb is if you're sick, stay home, and mask on the 6th to 10th day if you've had to be out with COVID. But we'll put something out. Unless you have specific questions, I don't think we want to spend a lot of time on this year. So that's it, and we're off and running.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Pam regarding what she's covered in her superintendent's report? Seeing none,
Okay.
we will move on to our continued business. First item, fiscal year 23 planning, school committee and superintendent reflection and goal setting. We discussed that Pam's going to lead us through this conversation together, keeping in mind that this is a multi-year consideration. So Pam, please go ahead.
Find this.
While she's doing that, I'm not sure.
Thanks.
While she's
appreciate
doing that, I'm not sure if everybody gets emails from MASC at this point, but hopefully you do. I did note today that I got an email from MASC that they're having a learning lunch this Friday virtually from 12 to 1:15, specifically about setting goals, like school committee setting goals. So if you're available for that, I would definitely give that a shot. I will be there.
I know this isn't it, but I think I have to go through this to get to the other one. And
Yeah, I
then,
don't think I get those emails.
We'll have to fix that then.
do you want me to walk you through how we arrived at what's in the packet, and then you take it from there?
Do you want to start? So yeah, let's start with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Teresa had asked everybody who had interest in input to send it to me. And what I did was took it all and created a master document, which starts on the second page of what was sent to you. So it's called School Committee Goals, Draft for Discussion, with the overarching question, what's the purpose of the goals? And we think it's action items or statements of priorities for the year ahead, but that's for the team to discuss further if they feel like they need to. So all I do is go through with what the existing goals were for FY22 and provide what was the commentary that came in through the different submissions. And through that, I boxed these off because one of the most common refrains was, aren't these really kind of the same thing? And didn't we do some of this? So kind of made sense to take them together, and you'll see that's how we arrived with one of the recommendations on the front page. So what's bulleted underneath is just the inputs people had, where we should add particular language, combine into one goal. So just different inputs. And then things that were suggested or newly proposed, meaning they weren't pieces of commentary on the existing goals, but suggestions or questions. Could these be goals? Should this be a goal going forward? Could this be a goal going forward? I'd like to offer this as a goal going forward. So that's what suggestions or newly proposed are. Some of them fit in the school committee goals. Some of them are already addressed in other areas. And I think our whole conversation tonight will take care of answering some of those questions. Then there was a question that came up about the budget goals. So the committee has had, I'll say for 10 plus years, a set of budget goals that have stood, if you ask me why we have them separately, just kind of as a statement of purpose of what we hope to accomplish in our budget, what our values are when we create the budget. And I think it's always intended to act as a communication to our other boards as to what we hear from them, what we acknowledge are things that we have to consider, but what we also hold in priority over those things. So that's why you have statements like work within 2.5, but maintain as long as we're maintaining the program, or work within 2.5, but adhere to our class size guidelines. And there is language in there that allows for flexibility when you just have a year that it can't be met. So I think the intent there is really just to communicate that we have a common understanding of what we collectively, as all the boards in the two towns and the school committee, see as kind of the working principles behind the budget planning process. So that can be discussed further. They can be incorporated in. That's all up for the committee to decide. So there was some commentary on some of them, and I'm happy to answer questions about, why we had some and why we didn't have others. Some do feel like, why do we have to talk about state mandates? That's where we get into the two towns, because it often, very frequently, we're having conversations with the towns about why do you have to do this and why can't you just cut that? And I think this always stood to say that there are many things that are not discretionary for spending. So I'm just kind of picking and choosing instead of reading the whole document to you. And then I did a parking lot at the end. Just these are things that came up in the commentary, but didn't have a home necessarily under one of the goals or as a newly formed goal. And again, I think we might be able to find some places for them through our discussion tonight. And then the subcommittee to-do list. I don't really know what we want to do with this. I just wanted to note it on here. And duly noted that some of these things, if you're new to it, may not make any sense to you just yet. Like, what is the 12-month working agreement? So that you have a policy document that sits as an outline of benefits for commitments and benefits for people who are on a 12-month payroll and serve in central office or support staff roles, but don't have a contract that governs them. So we only have one contract presently, and that's the teacher's contract. Everyone else either falls under a 10-month working agreement, what has become known as the 10-month work agreement, or the 12-month work agreement. And we've just noticed over the course of the year in working on the teacher's agreement that if you look at this document, it's woefully outdated. So we just need to bring it up to speed. So that's one example. So with all that said, this is a whole bunch of record keeping on the back 3 pages that, after going through with Teresa and saying, I think this is what these mean, I think this is how it can be grouped together, thought was, let's go out fresh with, this is what we think we could distill all of this down into for 3 goals. That wasn't very artfully put, but these are 3 goals that represent what we think everybody is trying to say in these pages. So this could be on the mark, it could be way off the mark, or it could be probably, as it's intended, just a starting point for discussion instead of starting with a whole lot on a page and not really knowing where to jump in. So this is just food for thought, and happy to answer questions.
Before we take questions, one thing that I think would be helpful, and I know it's sort of overlapping with a little bit of what we're covering tonight, but one thing that has come up a few different times is, what is the point of this? What are we using this for? And the idea that, one of the questions for us to address is, what are we using this for? Is it, again, historically, it's been a forward-facing, statement of, these are our priorities, effectively. This doesn't need to be a how document. We don't need to spend, time outlining exactly how we're going to do all of these things. So as an example, with number 1, looking at the budget and working toward the financial health of the district, short and long term, we don't have to outline for this how. We need to identify, is this one of our top priorities for the year? Same thing for number 2 and number 3. And then, are we missing anything that is going to be a top priority for the year? So looking at that level. Pam, would you speak briefly, though, to the idea of, this is our school committee goals versus your goals versus the DIP, and just a high level of the purposes so that we don't get them conflated?
Yeah, and I'll provide my editorial comment. I think they can be whatever you want them to be, but what they've historically been is a way to show alignment between all of the different groups and subgroups within the organization, right? Because if I want to go off and pursue an international baccalaureate, I want to create an international baccalaureate school out of MERSD, and that's my goal, and that's a goal that's not aligned with anything or any of the priorities. That's a wonderful goal, but it doesn't fit here. So I think what we've tried to do is establish kind of a hierarchy of the goals, starting with the strategic plan, where the committee fits within the strategic plan and what it's going to focus on promoting over the next year, ensuring my work, which balances between where the committee wants to go and how we get the staff and the schools to go, so kind of the in-between piece, then the district plan, then the school committee, the school plans, and then the teacher plans. So it's that one piece that's coming between our really big grand 10-year vision and what our short-term workable goals might be to achieve that. So I think directionally, we all want to be pulling in the same direction, and I think that's how we've used it in the past. So I don't know if that answers your question, and I think that's a helpful tool.
I think so.
It's an annual alignment check to make sure we're all still on the same page and pushing in the same direction.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so to move this forward, let us begin with that question then. Is that how we wish to use this at this time? Do we wish to use this as a, as we historically have to put forth that these are our priorities currently? Is that how we wish to use this document? Matt says yes.
Thumbs up.
Matt says yes. Anna, did you have a question or a thought on
Both.
whether we're, so is it on how we're using the document?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how we're using the document should be aligned with the district improvement plan, the school committee goal, and the superintendent goal. So when I create a table to compare the three with the major categories, which I sent it to you guys as well, there are some, I guess, going back to what you were saying earlier, how are we aligning the goals together? I feel like right now is not quite aligned, or it doesn't map perfectly together.
Okay.
But before we discuss about what is the priority for the school committees, I feel like all the subcommittees haven't met yet, and we all have a lot of work that we have to do. Shouldn't we start with that first, to make sure that we, within subcommittee, we all know what we need to do and accomplish, and all together as a group, as a school committee, that we know what is the common top priority that we need to do. And to add on to that, there's a lot of budget things that we're talking about here. Just because we haven't met yet and we haven't gotten into the details about, and I haven't had access to have the data that I would like yet. So I actually don't feel I'm equipped to prioritize.
Sure.
From the budget perspective, like if we're gonna have a separate budget goals.
All right. So as a point of response, that actually opens up a good point to bring forth, which is that some of these things, again, are coming from a period of, we've been working on these over time as well, and bringing all of that input together about, that's why we looked at last year's goals and what do you think we've met, what's missing, what should we carry forward and what not. I can understand that some of this doesn't quite make sense yet, and having been in your seat 2 years ago, I can see why that's the case. And also I know for you that it's going to. So I think that's a question for the committee then, is this a conversation that we wish to not have currently because we don't think that our new members have had a chance to gain the knowledge that they need yet? Kate?
I would just add, I think that it's a little bit of the chicken or the egg, right? I hear what you're saying, Anna, about feeling as though the subcommittees can't lend their perspective to these goals because some of them haven't met yet. But I also feel like our subcommittees don't have direction until we provide the goals as a group.
So let's take one step back then and go with, rather than whether this is, whether we use this document. No, whether we use this document in the way that we're discussing. So once we do this, is the intent that we use it as we historically have to set our priorities so that we understand what they are and that the public understands and the other boards that we work with understand. Any thoughts on that? Anyone have any reason not to use it in that way? Yes, question.
When you say so the public understands, how is this pushed forward for the public? How do they even know what our goals are? Other than
Great
as
question.
people sitting.
So, well, they will be on the website,
Yeah.
presumably they will be. But I probably should have been more clear because I think that the other boards that we work with also, that's a more important thing. I don't know that we actually have taken to putting it out and making sure the public understands. Maybe you could speak to that.
Should we take out a page in the cricket?
You could take out a page in the.
You could.
I wasn't suggesting one way or
Yeah.
another.
No,
I just wanted to
yeah.
understand what you meant.
I'm reflecting. I think There have been times where the committee has backed into the goals, like this is the work that's before us, so we are just articulating what we're gonna be working on this year. There are times when we've been coming at it more projecting forward where we would like to be going, and I would say that's probably where we were when we were coming, well, we wanted to be coming off of the strategic plan, but we were competing with a lot of things that were more pragmatic and being pushed to the top of the agenda. And I think the committee hasn't necessarily in the past done a lot of publication, other than tying them into some of the materials that get published around budget time when we're writing budget articles, or referring to the why we need certain things. But we have a very fresh strategic plan, so that does provide the why, and Jake, has been good at bringing that up and using that as a touchback point. So this really serves as a document primarily for this group to keep you all, for all of the groups to kind of
That's
stay
focus.
in sync with one another.
Jake, you had a comment?
So I'll say, I appreciate that we actually put this off until we have the district improvement plan at the same time, because, and to your point, that alignment is key. And that in this meeting, we have the strategic plan, which, we're not doing anything with, but we have it, to Pam's point. The school committee goals, the district improvement plan, and Pam's reflection on her goals, all in the same meeting allows us to have that alignment conversation. And those different timescales, the school committee goals are just this year, right? So what's our focus for this year? We can't do everything. So I think this is going to give us direction, because there's 10 things on the policy group that we could be doing, right? What's kind of key, this will help us.
I would say more frequently than not, and if anybody, the goals don't change drastically, have not changed necessarily too much from year to year. Something might roll off or something might take on a sharper focus, but there has been a steadiness to them. And I think that's because it's backed, to your point, by other things, which is there's a vision that's been set forward, and that's why certain things are on the district improvement plan and certain things aren't, and certain things are kind of relegated to routine tasks. So it's really about coming to terms with how you think you're going to spend this year and next year.
Before I take a second question from you, does anyone else have a thought or a comment on this?
Yeah, it's just sometimes it just feels non-negotiable in terms of what it is, like coming on during COVID. It's like,
Yeah.
we have all the cool ideas we want. COVID's gonna be a goal, for the year. And right now, like, I don't have to get too much into the details, but budget feels like that. Like we can, so when I see the 3, that one feels like almost like a non-negotiable one. So that's my thought. The other 2 seem like it could be up for more of a discussion, but I don't think like budget, just like COVID couldn't get bumped off of a list, feels like especially budget this year can't get bumped off.
Anyone else have a thought before I take a second round?
Sure. So again, just the year that I've been here, these are our goals. There's a lot that happens within these. So I think there's a lot of movement. Things always come up that need your attention, especially at the subcommittee level, which is why we do these. So I do think, these to me are tied well to our general goals and also what every school committee should be working on. There's a lot of minutia that goes into this over the year. So this looked great for me,
Thank you. All right. Anna had a question, and then we'll move to the next part of this. Yeah.
So the goal should represent what the school committee does, right?
Not necessarily what we do, but what our,
What we're
Trajectory
going
is.
to do in 2023.
Where the energy is going to be.
yeah, where the focus is.
where the focus is. Yeah, not everything that we're going to do. No.
So the reason why I ask is this is basically 3 major categories: budget, facility, and student well-being. And one of the key things that school committee does is also evaluate him. So should we put that as a goal or not?
You have to do that.
We don't have a choice.
We don't have a choice there.
That's the law. We have to evaluate. him.
I know, but like, should we put that as a goal if this is gonna be external communication? And maybe I'm confusing goals with, I don't know, just a thought, I don't know.
Sounds like that's her.
But most
Can
people
I,
don't know.
can I take a side moment for something. So just for the purposes of this conversation,
Yep.
I'd like to entertain a motion to set aside the formality of the Robert's Rule thing where I have to
Yep.
do the whole thing. Is anyone interested in that motion, making that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have hesitation.
I'm not sure what you're doing here.
What I'm trying to,
Opening.
You can just talk.
I know.
Okay.
I'm a no.
That's fair.
It's a school night.
It was a school night. Fair enough. Okay. So we need the actual number then. I'm sorry, if you're not clear what I'm,
The eyes carried it.
you guys carry it. Okay. So what we're doing is trying to make it so that we can have this as a discussion, recognizing that it needs to be ordered still. So I don't have to wait for, he doesn't have to wait for, you know, everyone to go around before asking a second question necessarily. We have, that's part of the policy, that we have the ability to set that aside for the purposes of a discussion. Okay, so, does anyone have any thoughts on that? I don't think we need a goal
I don't
for,
think you need a goal for,
that.
like, there are gonna be a lot of routine matters, and I would put the evaluation as one of them that we're going to have to do. The vouchers, there'll be school choice, like, just
Yeah.
certain votes that will
Yeah.
come up that it's partly, you're gonna find, and it might be a frustration for you, that in a lot of cases, it's things that we will do managerially to prepare and bring forward for your review, and it's an up or down vote to
Yeah.
either consent to continue or to send us back to investigate other alternatives or something like that. So I don't think those need to be codified. I think this is more, it's partly pragmatic. You are gonna have to deal with the fact that we have $1 million gap in our budget. And, you know, and I think we need to work on the language that we're using, because I think it's not framing,
I think so too.
it's not framing it the right way, because it's not about, we can afford textbooks, we're not using curriculum from 1972. It's like, we can make those small ends meet, but we have a structural problem that repeats itself year over year. We told you 10 years ago we would have this problem today, and it's now today, which is the town's desire to fund at a certain level is not aligned with the actual rate of growth at which level services rises. And what we do is work collaboratively to put off the inevitable, which is you need to catch up for not paying at its real cost over 5, 6, and 7 years. And when you get a curveball in there, like a 28% insurance hike, that curveball accelerates the timeline. So this is something we've been talking about for 12 years. When we say budget, it feels like we're talking about our accounting practices or where we're choosing to spend dollars, where everything is it's pretty vanilla year to year, and the buckets are pretty much the same. And the budget really isn't being designed to advance many new programs. Those usually come from secondary sources or one-time monies. So I think that's my frustration, is that obviously, we're not using the right terminology or language to communicate the financial problem we're having, which is a funding source.
I think we are, because we
Okay.
went through this for the last 2 years, at great length. I think we are. I think it's an issue of over time that will come. We haven't
Okay.
had a lot of those conversations yet with our new committee. So I think that will come.
And I'll just exit by saying, I would strongly urge you to consider having that as a stated goal someplace, because the solution doesn't rest with this committee. And that's the work of the committee, is to interface with the other boards and committees and the public to try to wrestle down the problem and come to common terms. So that's why it keeps elevating, and that's why I think it may feel predetermined that we're going in this direction, but it was conversation among board heads last year that it's inevitable, because one of the towns may not have the resources on hand to solve the problem itself. So sorry if I went down a bit of a rabbit hole.
Nope, that's okay. And I think it leads to where it is. So maybe taking a step back and recognizing that we've had the chance to look at the previous goals. Everyone had a chance to send input in advance before this was drafted. Recognizing that, is there anything that anyone feels is glaringly missing? So, or that you have a real question should be included, like Anna had a question about the evaluation. Now we've discussed that. Yes.
the goal that I feel like, it's hard for me to look at a set of school committee goals without seeing something about the academic excellence of our district. I feel like while I am really proud of the fact that we were number 4, I feel like that needs to be part of our focus. That needs to be part of our mission as a school committee. And while I don't know where that falls out, I recognize that there's tasks on this list that are going to have to be prioritized because of their timing. I almost just feel like I can't, as a responsible, member of my community, say that that shouldn't be on our list as a goal.
So am I hearing you right that you're saying you're not seeing that in these? Because I do, but if you're not, that's what I want to hear. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I did submit that as a goal, and I guess, no, I honestly don't really see that coming through the way I think I'd want it to.
Yeah. Jake?
So I was framing it differently. I also don't see kind of academic program change or improvement here. My version of it, though, was not just academic excellence, but strategic plan. Like making sure that strategic plan is explicit in here. That's, to me, how we achieve academic excellence, right? That's the whole purpose of the strategic plan, is to move the academic program forward into the future, right? So to me, our focus on the strategic plan is how we achieve that academic excellence, and that doesn't stand for you.
That's interesting. So I'm seeing this right in number 1, but it may be that I'm so budget or so finance focused.
Number 1 is finance, yeah. That's,
And to me, that's,
To me, it's fine.
it would, and it does, and it should, but that's where I see it in there, that the point of that is so that we can do those things. But I hear what you're saying, that that's not feeling explicit. So,
So
Yep.
I think that this was previously more explicit within the COVID goal, which was provide for the health and safety of students and faculty while maintaining a robust educational program, MERSD, and remember town's value, specifically during the COVID crisis. I think that that's still a goal. It's just not specific to the COVID crisis anymore. Health, safety, robust educational program.
all right, so I'm hearing a few people feel that there's not strong enough language in there reflecting the academic excellence that we can get by way of the strategic plan that we have, okay? Any other thoughts about something missing here? Because this is just, I don't even know if we'd call this a first read. Would we call this a first read and then we
I think
make edits and make a second?
I would see where we get.
Yeah.
Just see if you've got enough. It could just be adding a goal
Yeah.
and changing some language, or it could be feeling like you're not even there yet. So the recommendation would be to just take this and create some version of it minus code language.
well, we've
That
got
was
three key strategies in the strategic plan. Those should be represented somewhere. Or if you count financing, but we have a finance goal separate.
Okay, so you're saying you want more explicit language regarding the actual strategic plan.
Well, number 3 is
That is one.
of the strategic
So
initiatives.
the,
I think you could marry, I have been marrying 2 and 3. They're not numbered, but the way they
Yeah.
appear. Because I think they are drawing from the same, they're intertwined and draw from the same common set of foundational skills, and then each take a slightly different route. So I think you could combine the 2 of those together. I think you have your financial one right in number 1, which is the stability of the district, and I knew this. I don't think we're ready yet. We're not ready yet to now layer on authentic learning in an articulated way. I think we can get there next year, but I think with everything on the plate this year, it's foundational, but we could set it up as a foundational stage goal. Because when I looked at the dip and kind of went back and took a look at where it's very heavy this year on SEL, and authentic learning kind of picks up afterward.
Are we providing feedback as well on the language or no?
Sure.
Well,
Oh, I'm sorry, overstep.
what if we take general input and then wordsmith this outside of meeting?
Sure.
Okay.
But Jake, did you have a suggestion, like of how to work it all in?
I could after this meeting, yes.
So would we like to accept that offer and invite Jake to offer? Would you like to put together some language for that after this
Sure.
meeting?
Sure.
Okay.
Accept.
Offer accepted. Great. We don't even need to vote on that. Okay. All right. So that portion of things, is there anything else that's glaringly missing? I personally don't see some, and also recognizing that I don't think it needs to be on a goal, but part of the goal for this year is for us to work together as a team and all come to a level of understanding and learning together is in itself taking quite a bit of time, energy, and effort from everyone too.
I think that's a fair goal too.
So why did, I mean, I think that it's
Could we
easy enough
explicit?
to add that to number 3, partner with our students, families, faculty, staff, and each other in pursuit of our strategic initiatives.
That's a great
to
idea.
nurture an inclusive and diverse school culture that recognizes contributions and uniqueness of all individuals.
I like that. I like that a lot. Does anyone have any reason against that? Anything else we feel strongly about before we close this out and wait for, and let Jake?
This may be a wordsmithing thing, but
Mhm.
number 1, I think the point was made earlier to distinguish between our budget and the financing
Mhm.
from the towns. I don't know if that's a wordsmithing thing about number 1, or if there should be 2 goals. Because there, and this goes partly to our conversation coming up around the district improvement plan. Are there budget issues we need to worry about for carrying out that strategic plan?
Right.
That might be different from prior years because of its strategic plan.
My personal opinion is to keep this broad. It's
The other reason for that is because the audiences are probably different from those.
Right.
The financing is member town, board.
mhm.
The budget may be more public. Support engagement. See what's it going to take to make changes.
I'm not sure I'm sold on the idea of adding or separating those two out at this point. My initial inclination is again, no, I'm going to reserve my initial inclination on that. So I can put it together.
I guess what I'm saying is what's missing here is community engagement with the strategic plan, whatever form that takes.
Okay, I think
Right.
that's going to come
And
in
if
the
that's-
how.
Okay,
I really do. Because in the process of having to accomplish number 1 and number 2, we will have to have a more detailed plan of attack on some of this. And I think that that's going to come in the how. I'm certain it is,
then I will look forward in the district improvement plan.
not the dip. In our how we actually go about the working collaboratively.
So where do
The
we represent our how?
We don't yet. That's in the
Where
whole
will it be?
process of the budget discussion moving forward. Between-
Collaboration meeting.
Sometimes in collaboration,
But
but
I'm suggesting it needs to move beyond the town collaboration.
yes.
Okay.
So right now we have the whole schedule of the, I don't have.
Which we haven't looked at yet.
Right now, we
Right.
have the schedule for the year.
Yep.
We will have the budget process, and within part of that, since we are moving toward a correction, we are gonna have to have some explicit how we go about this and the community engagement. That will come as part of the conversation. It definitely will, probably not until November.
Okay, I think that's where reviewing the schedule will be helpful for me to understand how we get there.
Okay, for right now, let's focus on this and we can review the schedule at another time for sure. Yes.
One comment about goal number 1, as a new member, I think that goal could be said without the pursuit of a correction language, because the goal is really to work with our member towns. You can read that whole thing without pursuit of correction. I understand that this committee, prior to my arrival, has already reviewed a lot of materials and decided that it looks in all likelihood like a correction is necessary. But the goal is that we work together to allocate resources that support the robust programming that we want, blah, blah, blah. However, we managed to do that. And so for me, sitting here today, having not heard from Finance Subcommittee or anything about the budget, it's hard for me to stand here and say that pursuit of correction is the way we get there.
Mhm.
I know that you've alluded to this. I listened to the school committee meeting before I came onto the board, and I understand what the school committee has said.
Mhm.
but it feels a little different for me to adopt that as my own knowledge.
That's fair, and I can understand if new members feel that way. I will just say that, again, this is, as Pam just pointed out, a process that has been in place for many, many years. And we made commitments to that in the last 2 years.
So maybe that's fine. Maybe I'm just stating that some of us have yet to.
I can understand that.
So the override is a done deal?
No.
Not
No,
an
no, no.
override.
So
So,
I'll
I mean,
share
correction.
and then you guys discuss. It says pursuit of correction because the school committee can't get a correction on its own. It needs to, the funding mechanism needs to be corrected in one of 3 potential ways. The towns agree to a higher growth rate annually and fund it through their existing revenues, whether they decide to use a combination of receipts, increasing the amount of money they collect over 2.5, or using their reserves. So it's actually the town that's going to decide whether or not it goes for an override. We won't make that decision. We have to work with them to choose one of the methods available to them to increase the revenues coming to us. Or the third option is, they can either increase revenues from existing sources, ask for an override of the community to increase their revenues to pass on to us, or we will need to reduce the budget by $1.2 million out of the gate this year. You can look through our materials from the past 12 years. I mean, whether it's 1 million, 1.2 million, or 1.5, when it's all said and done, there's only one way to get there. And that's through staffing reductions, which impacts your class sizes and your program breadth. We can look at 7 different ways of solving the cut problem or arriving at that 1.2. That's what you saw if you watched in the spring. But those are basically our 3 options. I don't think we have we'll call it 1 million. We don't have $1 million in extra dollars for unneeded spending.
So the idea here is that,
If I'm wrong, but the towns also have the option to dip into.
Yes, that's one of the ways they can raise their revenue.
so when we use this pursuit of correction, that doesn't mean us pushing an override. It means correcting in whatever those ways are, or something new and different that the towns come up with that we don't even know about.
I will say, I mean, I can't speak for the committee, but from what I heard last year, what it doesn't mean is agreeing again to lower the real number at which we're growing.
Right.
To help the towns make a goal that they've set for themselves. Because they've set budget goals about what they're willing to and wanting to spend on an annual basis on the schools. And we've been working with those numbers. So I think the push is coming that we've been doing our part of the partnership. We're going to need them to have we're going to need them to give a little bit on what they'll accept.
well, then why mention it? If there are many different ways, 3 ways to potentially solve the issue, we don't know which one yet. It hasn't been decided, so why mention it?
Because that's our work to do.
I think that
Yeah.
the mention, would be if we said the pursuit of an override, but I think that we're purposefully saying correction because the towns could choose not to pursue an override and fund
So the last,
budgetary
yeah,
correction.
like the last time the school budget had a correction, there was no override in Essex, only Manchester.
And the budget has to be correct.
Yes.
And our budget has to be corrected in order for us to provide level services. So last year what happened is that we were told, the answer was no last year, so we had to make cuts to level services. We're gonna have to, and that was just a small amount of cuts. We're gonna have to start making major cuts if we don't have a correction. That's the bottom line.
Or the cuts are the correction. That's the thing. The correction has to happen.
Correction.
There is a deficit, a massive deficit. And so the correction is addressing that deficit in some way. It may be through cuts, if
That
that's
makes
the
more
direction we
sense.
get.
Yeah.
I thought I'd understood you guys to say at a different point. We were changing the terminology and not calling it an override anymore. We were calling it a correction.
We'll call it, yes, because it's not necessarily an
But
override.
that's, so
Right.
thank you. I didn't appreciate that.
I didn't either.
Okay. That makes more
Like
sense. And
initially, yeah.
I'm comfortable with that because you're right. If there's a deficit, there's a deficit and it has to be corrected. And
Has to be
one of
corrected one
these-
way or another,
One
yeah.
of 3 ways.
Yeah.
I also think that it's important to draw attention to the interplay between goals 1 and goals 2, which is that we cannot create a timeline for pursuing renovation and repair of Essex Elementary without also correcting the budget.
and I don't know when the last time, our new Manchester members were in Essex Elementary was, but the building is falling down. It's not, people, sorry, it's a public meeting, the building is not falling down, but it will need some renovations and repairs.
It was
And they will just get more expensive.
And if one of the correction choices the school committee utilizes is use of your reserves or our reserves, then that puts the Essex piece in greater jeopardy because the reserves are there in case the roof goes. So that's one, if we get past 1 and 2 this year, I'll be very surprised. I mean, that is going to take an incredible amount of time to sort out, create understanding, and create a pathway forward. I think 2 is also there. We'll get, they'll call it the Habib Report too. So you'll get that same report we had when we went out before determining whether Essex or Memorial needed to be first in the queue. We'll have that document by November. And the committee's gonna have to, we're all gonna have to work together. I will make a recommendation. Kind of let the cat out of the bag in many public sessions over the past 2 years. I think we need to accelerate the timeline for Essex Elementary. I don't think it has 10 years. I'm no expert. We'll wait till the report comes in. But to Kate's point, it's going to continue to cost more and more money. And I will advocate that the school committee advocate for a fast timeline to ensure educational parity between the 2 schools and not create a large expense. And not knowing when when something's going to happen there. So those 1 and 2 are deep. I mean, there's a lot of work to do in 1 and 2.
And number 2 informs number 1 for our member towns.
It does.
That,
And how
that
they
will,
choose to.
with what they choose to support in terms of correction. So a lot of this in November is going to be an important time frame for us.
In number 3, I would like to express how I think I see it, and if it's not the case, then it's important for you to know. I think some of the work we're doing, it needs it's part of the strategic plan, so in theory, it has the endorsement of the town and the committee. But I think if we're watching what's happening in other towns or happening in a national conversation, it's important for everyone to know that we're all on the same page in pursuit of that strategic initiative, and that we have some common understanding about what we're hoping to gain by it. So I think that's kind of a public statement of support.
But there's also work we need to do to support it as a school, committee, particularly policy.
Yeah.
So unless I'm hearing otherwise at this point, it sounds like if we can incorporate some language that emphasizes the academic excellence in connection with the strategic plan, which Jake is going to work on the wording for and then send out, that otherwise we are generally in agreement now that we've come to some understanding about some of these. Is that a reasonable statement? I got thumbs up. I got thumbs. Okay. Then I don't think we need to vote on this or anything. That's just a first
No, you can,
experience with it
hopefully you can bring back the second draft
Yeah.
on the, was it
on the
20th?
20th.
And
Great.
approve it.
Great. So if that's the case, thank you, Jake, for taking that on. Right. Are you going to go further into superintendent reflection?
I certainly can. I have
Okay.
it from last meeting.
Great.
Just- second. That was 8-2, right?
Yes.
Has everyone had a chance to look at them at some point over the summer, or is this
Yeah.
brand new? Okay.
I can send it to the superintendent goals.
It's the same one that we saw a few weeks ago, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess, I mean, I can either go. Let me say this, that on there is a COVID learning goal with, not a COVID management goal, which I really hope is defunct right now, and I would just say that that's closed and we can take that off. I don't think that there's any work to do, and if it should rear its head again, I think we're practiced enough that that doesn't have to be something that hopefully overtakes everything we do. And if it does, then we'll all be in that same boat together and can revisit the need to set it as a goal. But I think that's something that we included because it was an acknowledgement that that goal might supersede everything else and take all of our time, because that was our experience in the prior year. So I think that one's done, it's gone, it was put in red on the bottom as a carryover. The rest of the goals, I would say, do connect in general to the goals that you have in a couple of different ways. We don't have explicitly stated, I'll go back to DEI. In your goal 1 for the finances, we don't explicitly have the negotiation with META identified as a goal for the year. It is embedded, I would say, in number 1, because that informs a lot of what our multi-year financial needs will be. It's in my professional practice goal, and I mentioned this in the comments, mostly because of its impact on, I think, what is the kind of the run-through theme of most of what you see in our work right now, district-wide, which is on the management of our culture and climate. And the META contract has the potential to be a multi-year endeavor. It already has been. And it weighs heavily on staff when we have this level of uncertainty about what their financial future will bring. Given our conversations publicly about the broader uncertainty about where the district's going to be, I think it's going to add a little fuel to the fire as we get into the year. Our goal is to resolve by October so that the teachers can be focused on teaching and learning and not on contractual negotiations. And so we can be best informed as we plan forward for the long-term financial needs of the district. It's on there because we have the intersection of culture and finance, and we also have our major strategic initiative about stability. So I think it ties to each of those. I think it ties to the school committee goal. And again, it's a partnership with school committee. We're working hand in hand with that subgroup on there. So it also is something that is extremely time consuming. And will probably be a big part of what I'm working on in the next, well, we're optimistically going to say 2 to 3 months, but it has the likelihood of taking the whole year, especially if we are fortunate enough to finish in October and then take up with the second negotiation, which is the TA contract. So that's where that is. I think we're in a good place for where we can be right now, and it's going to start. I think the timeline will start to accelerate over the next couple of months. Again, when we formed these back in summer of 21, we had just begun DEI. If anyone remembers watching meetings that summer, our DEI initiative was born out of the school committee resolution on anti-racism, which kind of put to the top of the list the need to develop some goals around it and some action items. And again, I think getting this on solid footing, I think for everything that we've learned, it's going to be an 8-year process for cultural change. So before we start to see anything significant, will probably be a few years. And I think it's something that's again, it's going to consume time. I had a role and still have a role in making sure the principals are equipped to take on this work, because so much of it happens at the school level for which they're responsible. So that's really been a big focus of year 1, was working with Michael on just some leadership training around how to handle, how to develop ourselves and develop our own cultural competency, but then how to lead others through it and support divergent communities. And that's ongoing work. I don't think we've checked that box yet. So that's why it was set up as a 2-year goal. Yeah.
Question about the,
Yeah.
So is what you're listing here, the stage 1, is to train or create awareness or whatever it is for the staff first, not the students?
Yes. Well, at the same time, I mean, there are multiple strands. So there's work that we're doing with the staff around understanding what we're calling cultural competence. So developing an awareness and then understanding the scope of the work and then building into practices as we go. But there's a responsibility that we have to fulfill in terms of ensuring equity across the district, making sure our materials are not biased in any way. So I think we have multiple strands of the work going on at one time.
Why can it involve students or incorporate it in the curriculum?
It is, but the teachers in the curriculum, people charged with looking at the curriculum need to know what to look for and need to know how to assess. So if you look on the district improvement plan, we have the establishment of an equity rubric that we can be using uniformly throughout the district to assess different pieces of material. Otherwise, you'll have, you know, Pam assesses one thing and it looks good to her, and Teresa looks at something else and doesn't look good to her, so she changes it out. So we're trying to develop some systematic tools so that we have a common lens on which we're making assessments.
I think some of this is gonna come together when we go through the dip too, so let's hold questions till we're through.
And the other piece, you know, that I had been working on, and I hope we're in for year two, is the diversification of workforce working group. It's something that the DESC was hosting, and it's kind of, it's overlaying with some of the work that we're doing with Michael, but it's more about basically what I'm seeing in most of the early training is ensuring that you have an environment in which you can, before you start recruiting people, create an environment in which people can be recruited into and be sustained when they arrive. So we're learning about how to set the stage so that we can be more attractive to a diverse pool of candidates, and then work on our recruitment strategies and getting more people in. So a lot of it is just starting with self, and self not being necessarily individuals, although they play a role, but self as our whole school community. Labor management. Is there something else on here? Oh, the multi-year budget. I hope we're all clear on this one at this point. Yeah, okay. And that's just a work in progress. And then the complete projects, this was just kind of a checklist for myself and for the committee of things that kind of got stalled out during COVID and that we wanted to bring to a close. So memorial project, almost there. I mean, we still carry the SBC, so it's not officially closed out yet, but coming soon. We did complete the strategic planning work, and we still want to bring the Essex Playground to a close. And looking through my notes from last year, we still need to go through the naming process for both the playgrounds. That's something that just fell off the list. So I think, you know, I look at goals as being just it's a goal. It's something we're striving toward, but something that can get interrupted pretty quickly as other things come into play. And that's why this time span tended to have a bit of a pragmatic approach to it, because two of the largest pieces were actual things that I knew were going to be taking a lot of time, which means drawing attention off of other things. So happy to answer questions. But that's kind of that's how I saw them tied, or how the thinking was of how they tied back to the school committee.
Does anyone have questions about, again, this has been on the plan for a couple meetings. Any questions for Pam specifically about her goals at this point, please?
So can I ask maybe it's a process question, I'm not quite sure. So we're mid-cycle of the 2-year process for you, Pam.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate your reflections on this and kind of where we are, especially new to the committee. I guess, given that last one, you know, development of the strategic plan has kind of been checked off. Now we have a strategic plan. There's nothing in your goals about kind of making sure that strategic plan is moving district. Obviously, there's a DEI one that you have there that we had previously.
Mm-hmm.
In the spirit of alignment, is there a means for making an adjustment to align that so that it's in your goals as well as in the strategic plan and the DIP?
Or perhaps could we frame the question differently as, how do you see that in your goals? Because if you're not seeing it, but perhaps she is.
And to add on to that,
I'm seeing the whole thing in a different way because I'm not brand
Yeah.
new, so.
No, I guess I'm not, I think it would be I guess I'm missing, how are we thinking, how would you recommend framing a goal about the strategic plan that's actually, if it's it feels overwhelming to say, I mean, I could steward the strategic plan.
Well, it's really embodied in the district improvement plan.
Yeah,
yeah,
and then I think I'm sorry, Anna, go ahead.
a lot of them actually have the year that when it's supposed to be measured. And I think to your point, there are a lot of things that are deliverables in the improvement plan, district improvement plan, that's not reflected, that's not included in your goal, and maybe it should. That's what you're saying, right?
And we don't need each and every deliverable.
No,
in
I think
goals.
what I would probably, what I have done in the past is I will pull to my stated goals, what will be the focus work for the next year or two. Or what I think will draw most of my attention. Like, I know I we have some pieces of authentic learning moving forward. They're not going to be major pieces that I'm individually working on. So I tend to try to highlight the pieces that I'm going to have my hand in. I mean, I have kind of like think of a band leader. I've kind of got my hand in a little bit of everything, or at least oversight over a little bit of everything. But some pieces I'm more actively involved in and engaged in moving forward. And I'll tend to try to bring those forward to the goals. We can have open to other ideas. Otherwise, this thing would be a mile long.
So perhaps one thing, so if I have learned nothing about Pam, I've learned that she's very astute in listening to the committee and the tone and tenor of the committee over the couple years. And so knowing that we're mid-cycle right now, taking your reflections on what's in place currently, I'm also pretty secure in knowing that you hear that we like the language of the strategic plan visually and explicitly in those things. So for next time around, that's something to consider.
What are you saying?
I'm saying I don't see a need to change her goals that are a 2-year cycle of goals, but that the next time a goals sheet comes around, she's likely to probably incorporate that language in the way that she's hearing us talk about it quite a lot.
So just to be clear, are you saying there's not a need, or there's not a mechanism for making that change?
I'm saying there's not a need. That's my opinion.
I personally would like it to be explicit if there's a means to do it.
What's the problem we're trying to solve right now?
Align the goals.
That there's a superintendent goal around implementing and moving the strategic plan forward via the deck.
I think some of the goals are like more broad versus some of like some of the goals are really specific. And I think it's just a little misalignment. I go back to what I was saying before, when I put the three together, it's not quite.
So I think that what we're hearing is
Give me the
people
goal.
like it more explicitly aligned. I'd rather we not give you the goal, though. That's not our
Because
job.
I'm
to
not hearing
help
what
us
it,
for goals.
I'm not hearing what it is.
Right, I
Disagree.
think that I'm missing,
Advanced.
I think I need some more specificity, Jake, around what.
And I get the concept. I'm not coming up with language in my head to frame it.
I've only thought through the concept here so far, so now you're asking me for details.
So for example, maybe this will help. So one of the, what is it? I don't want to swim. The district improvement plan is very specific about elementary program overview. And there's some other specific things too. But that's something that is more broad that would actually require you to oversee it. If you need to mention some of those. And this is just an example.
So I said like a school committee process question, because like, I don't agree with changing it. So like, is there like, put a motion second vote, or is it just like, because I don't want to say like, I don't want Pam to get marching orders out of my group,
Yeah.
So if there isn't a process, if there is a process, I think we should open it up for a motion and then vote on it. But if there isn't, then I guess I'll just say out loud, but I don't think we need to change the goals midstream.
So I think that the process would be, we could ask her to do it. There's nothing stopping her from changing that. So that's something that would come based on the agreement of a majority in the committee. So I think we need to go back to a little bit more formality for a moment. It looked like Erica had a question or a comment, and then maybe we'll take a straw poll on whether we think that we need to invite Pam to make changes to her current goal cycle. Or goals, excuse me. Erica.
Yes, Mike, I guess it's a comment, maybe it's a question. I mean, I'm looking at the strategic plan. There's all sorts of dates and deliverables in here. And as you said, Pam, to add all those dates and deliverables, you'd essentially, I think, be like restating huge sections of the strategic plan. So I appreciate that we want these things to all align, but we want to do it efficiently. Right now, it doesn't feel efficient. So I'm just trying to like, if there are already deliverables, you had mentioned earlier, being a steward of the strategic plan or being a steward of the district improvement plan. Is that sufficient? I can't think of how we get her to identify all of these deliverables without duplicating.
It's not,
Well,
it's
we're
not,
gonna go back to a little bit more formality for a moment.
Maybe a word on the district improvement plan.
Yeah.
Most of the deliverables are on there are not my personal deliverables.
Right.
So it is oversight on my part, right? So most of the things are tasked to the curriculum officer, the building principals, or them working in unison. So I tend to most often play the role of coach and band leader and try to get everybody to work together in pursuit of those common goals.
And ensure that it's continuing to.
We're
Yeah.
gonna go back to the formality for a little bit, please. Thank you. Okay, so that being the case, we understand where we're at. Let's take a straw poll. All in favor of asking Pam to change her goals to reflect this request? If you are in favor of that, please raise your hand. Okay, if you are not in favor of making that request, please raise your hand. Straw poll. I think part of it, again, is just a difference in the big picture purposes of the things,
I'm
but,
indifferent, just about.
oh, okay. Anyone abstaining from making the request of Pam? Raise your hand. Thank you, Anna. Noted in the record. I guess what I was trying to say earlier is that Pam is really astute though, and I would expect that in subsequent.
The other thing is, I don't know how many years it's been because COVID, there will be a report at the end of the year on the district improvement plan specifically and what has been accomplished and what has not. And I usually come with the district team to do that with each person doing their piece of it.
Okay.
So that might be piece of what you're looking for,
Mm.
but I mean, I'm open to added language in the
And at the
future.
end-
Maybe we get through the year and if we
Let's
want
get
to put
through the
something in for next year, that's fine.
And that's a good note for a lot of things that are going to come up. Let's get through a year together
To see the
before
whole
we make big changes, so that we can see how all the pieces fit together before we make a lot of changes
And
to
what-
things.
what I've done in the past, and I'm not like a great graphic designer person, so it doesn't maybe look as cool as I think it does, but we'll take the district plan and we'll do a key similar to what's on here and show you what's in progress, what's been met, you know, what got reevaluated and pushed out. So there'll be a report card, so to speak, on the district plan come June as we enter the next year. And those are 3-year goals. Those are 3-year deliverables on there. So that's where that comes from. So maybe that's how the two pieces work together.
Well, thank you for reflecting.
No problem.
That's probably a good segue then into the district improvement plan. Would you like to take us through? So just as a clarifier for all of us, the school committee has already approved the objectives of the district improvement plan. The objectives have been approved. It's the district actions and deliverables that are new.
Oh, good.
That helps.
Here it is. District improvement.
Oh.
And I don't think I want to read the whole thing to you.
No.
No.
So I'll do a quick intro and then I say we go by questions.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to show is this is an old slide. It did hit me when I was putting these notes together that this was very much a routine annual routine. That so much so that we had to retire the slide because I would come with the slide and they'd be like, are you really going to show us this slide again? But it serves a purpose now because you all haven't seen, you know, multiple years of the same thing and you're not tired of it yet. So what this tries to do is show you kind of how all of these pieces fit together. And maybe this helps also explain a little bit about where my goals are kind of an offshoot or somewhere between strategic and district improvement. Right, so we created the strategic plan, which sets the long-term vision. And then the district improvement plan moves in 3-year cycles within it. So we'll do 3 district improvement plan cycles within the 10-year life of the strategic plan. And that's not to say that these documents aren't all fluid and can't be subject to change if something drastic comes about, and we need to make a course correction. So if the 10-year plan informs the direction of the district improvement plan, the 3-year district improvement plan in concept informs the school improvement plan, at least the pieces that link directly back to pursuit of the strategic plan. There may be some, you'll see over the next 2 meetings, the middle and high school and the elementary schools will be coming with their individual plans. There may be smaller pieces that are school specific, that they have a goal worked in on, like perhaps the high school has something out of the NEASC report. I think most of it's going to track back nicely to the strategic plan, but there could be some offshoots of things that aren't directly aligned, but are important to moving the ball forward at those levels. They move in 2-year cycles, and then they inform the educator plans, right? So we're hoping that by the time teachers are writing goals, and we've had success with this over the years, that some of the educator goals will track directly back to the school improvement goals. So like ruler goals is an example of something we did when we started to first implement ruler. Everyone had a common ruler goal that they shared at the school level. So that's how all pieces fit together. This just gives you a sense of what informs the district plan. Right now, we're very heavy on the strategic plan being the one of the key ingredients. We used a lot of our third-party reports and student data to inform the strategic plan. Early on, federal and state mandates weighed heavier. So if you look back at some of the original improvement plans back in 11, 12, 13, we were going through a lot of DESE initiatives, something like the Educator Improvement Plan. So that's something that kind of pushed its way on. So we may have had some big picture strategic goals, but that was something like we had to do and had to implement, so it had to take up space. So these are just the inputs, how the cycle works together, how it all informs one another. You'll see that we built in, when we get into the third cycle of improvement planning, we start to line up a lot of assessments in preparation for redrafting the strategic plan. So it's kind of a gut check cycle. And then just some samples of what goes into improvement planning, goal setting, and then the different types of things that they use at the school level. So then that brings us to plan. You see it's all tracking with our 4 major strategic initiatives. Again, we've numbered them. I don't necessarily see them in any priority order, but just to kind of make sense of the document. It's set up with, the objectives of things we hope to accomplish, the actions we think we're going to take to achieve it, and then the deliverable. So something that can either be shared or utilized as an outcome of the actions. Just tracks to each of the initiatives. I think the one that we're going to be looking to learn a little bit more about is we're looking to do the NEASC elementary review. So NEASC is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. They've traditionally been a high school review tool. They set forward a series of self-assessments against some broad standards, and then they'll send a team in to do kind of a cross correlation to see whether or not what we're seeing is what they're seeing, and then give us some recommendations for improvement. We did that with the NELMS, which specializes in middle schools, just before Joanne, or when Joanne came on board. And it's going to be our recommendation that we do this kind of to line up the next generation of leadership at Essex Elementary, and to help us bring some greater resolution to, I feel like the district spends an inordinate amount of time trying to balance the 2 elementary schools to some common outcome that may never be achieved because they are 2 separate schools. So to see if they have any recommendations or external endorsement about where we are doing well in alignment and where we reasonably can look for greater alignment. One of the documents that's going to be coming out as a deliverable sooner rather than later is the elementary program guide, which articulates the common program between the 2 schools. I do think that will go a long way toward articulating what the commonality is. But then, I think there are issues just about how buildings are run and what some of the common practices are in the culture and climate of both buildings. So I think it would be a good tool for us to have them come in and help us better understand the dynamic at the elementary and where there's room for growth and room for what needs to probably be allowed to take place because it is just cultural in each building and should be embraced as part of those cultures, and what really needs to be tied together in greater order. So I think we're excited about that. And looking forward to learning a little bit more about it. To Jake's point, there will be an investment that has to be made. It's not free. But in terms of budgetary implications, we have learned to operate over the past few years that most of what comes through curriculum, we either have budgeted for it in advance, or we'll dedicate one-time money to fund it, or find an external source. So a lot of what we've been doing with Michael Eatman has been funded through the Essex Community Grant that we received as being part of a collaborative on the North Shore. The NEASC review, my guess is it's going to be somewhere in the 25 to 50 range. We'll look to use our one-time curriculum funds, so we have funds for investments every year, and divert it. Like, we're not doing a book purchase this year or a program purchase, so sometimes that money can be repurposed. I can say, and you can gut check me, I don't think there's been anything we've needed to pursue in terms of program improvements through professional development or investments that we have not been able to manage the budget to achieve, because most of them are planned in advance. When we're coming to big budget obstacles, it's I mean, I hate to use this again, but it's a 28% increase in healthcare in 1 year that we had no way of knowing was coming our way. Which means we put other things on the back burner. So nothing has jumped out at me on this. Even some of the staffing concepts are all based in some type of a reorganization or reallocation of funding in concept that we won't be able to achieve. I think, but bets are off if we're cutting $1 million in programming, because then it's a reprioritization of everything. But as it stood in the past. So that's one of the highlights on there. Again, I'm pretty excited about the elementary program of studies. I think we're going to follow that up with a middle school program of studies. Been a long-term goal for us to articulate things better. You know, not to go ancient history on everyone, but when we joined the two towns together, we didn't go through years of pre-work of what will it look like when we join as an organization, you know, join together. We just took two systems and put them together and let a lot stand for a while. And then this is trying to, you know, slowly over time kind of work people into common alignment. It came together much more quickly at the high school and then the middle school. In elementary, I think we've made a lot of progress, but it's still a struggle. So I think that was one of the things I wanted to note. And if you're comfortable, we can probably go to questions. I will note one other thing before we do that, which is, I anticipated that, you know, I think authentic learning, I've already said before, is off to a little bit of a slower start, and some of the bigger pieces of it are pushed out to next year, just because of where reality is meeting the planning and because of what we have in motion. I also think that what we've labeled as 1 and 2, the social emotional and the cultural competence initiatives, do a lot to create a culture more adaptable and adept at delivering on authentic learning and thinking about some of the concepts behind authentic learning and making those changes. Because if you're going to change how you're working with kids, and it's going to be more of an authentic environment, you're going to be less controlled in your approach. So the better equipped you are to deal with a differentiated student in front of you, the better experience kids will have and the better you'll feel theoretically about authentic learning. So I think it will thread together nicely. And we just don't have the bandwidth to do it at once. So we're trying to complete some projects and bring some components of things to a close before we start too much on the next step. And then the financial pieces should be common to many people. So questions?
So before we start questions, I'd like to do two things. One is, given the breadth of this conversation, I'd like to see if anyone would like to make a motion to reinstate our discussion, back to the Roberts rules.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstained? Any noes? Okay. Then the second thing before we start questions would be, let's clarify what we need to do here. We want to answer questions. Do you need a vote from us to approve this?
Vote to approve the improvement.
Vote. So we are going to be voting to approve the district improvement plan, recognizing again that we've already approved meaning the school committee has already approved the objectives. So what we're discussing here are the actions moving forward.
And, sorry,
I'll take your question, Matt.
and just so I'm clear, kind of going back to Pam's thing earlier, if it's moving towards no, all pretty much we're voting on is like kick it back to you and say, come back to us next time with something different, correct?
If we were to vote to not approve the district improvement plan, then.
We wouldn't vote for individual changes. We would just vote to have the district rework it and bring it back to us.
Correct.
It's a good
changes,
point,
but
Matt.
it's very good.
Typically, it runs a little bit like the handbooks.
Yeah.
Is it aligned with this? I'd ask you less to focus on the how, happy to take input and suggestions if you think there's a better how to get there, but this is our best effort on how we think we can accomplish these pieces within the objectives within the next 3 years. If you think it's misaligned with the strategic plan, if you think we're going off in a different direction, if you think we've misinterpreted what initiative 3 on inclusiveness means, that please flag those things, because then that's the what,
Yeah.
right? We're giving you the how we think we're going to get to the what we've established in the strategic plan. So we're asking you to make sure that we think we're going in the right direction and we're aligned with it. If you've got questions about why we maybe chose some of the hows, happy to answer them.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
All right, so we will go through questions again. Everyone will get a chance to go through once before we have follow-up. Anna, did I see your hand?
Yeah, can you define, two questions? Can you define the student-centered authentic learning?
No. That's one of our first tasks, because what we found was that
Broadly, what does it mean?
it means learning experiences that are less controlled and rote and more authentic to real life experience.
Okay.
So think project-based.
Okay, so my feedback
Yeah.
would be strategic initiative number 1, and then number 2, and then you have DEI number 3. I would recommend, because when I was looking at the DEI for 2022 to 2025, is really just to improve the awareness of whatever that might be for the staff in the workforce versus of the students or building the curriculums. I would actually like to see in initiative 1, how DEI is incorporated very specifically into a curriculum or program, or through the authentic learning, however you call it. Because I think that's part of the learning, that's part of the DEI.
I'm trying to see.
So, point of clarification, are you asking, or you're offering feedback
Yeah.
that you'd like to see the DEI
Incorporating
information,
initiative 1
how it's going to go through
to be
in
part of
strategic
the
initiative
authentic
1?
learning for students, not just to teach and train the staff, but also the students.
So I think the students will probably start to emerge more prominently in this in years 3, 4, and 5. Other than doing curriculum audits. Because really the key, what I'm understanding, and we're still on our journey, is that the key to being culturally competent is to first understand what it is. And for the staff to deliver, they first need to be aware and trained on how to lead students through their awareness.
But your staff come and go. So that's my take is you cannot just train the entire workforce and then, people will change. And then you try to implement it to the students. In my opinion, this is a real life experience that you need to incorporate into your curriculum right away. Because it's not like, 3 years down the road, especially in this.
So I think what we can
95%
do is
like that.
take you through, I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that we have culturally sensitive curriculum. We have, we're teed up to identify and start implementing an equity tool to review curriculum materials. And we have things in place like the ADL, Facing History, the Gay Straight Alliance. I mean, we are doing an incredible amount of work on creating a safe and open learning environment for students. What we're focused on in this work is creating an understanding among staff about the work that needs to be done differently in classrooms, how you interact with students. It's not a thing we're implementing, but it's a way in which the adults will interact with one another and with the kids in a way that's more culturally aware. So I don't see how we can't go around the training and get the outcomes we want for the cultural
You
environment.
don't go around.
Oh, better finish.
That's all.
Yeah, you don't go around, you do it at the same time. The same exact reason that you're training the faculties, the staff. You gotta do that for the students as well. Because they also need to learn and understand how the interaction should be seen or should be taught at a regular, daily basis. And I truly think that right now, the DEI initiative 3 is very passive. Like if it's gonna take 3 years to train the staff, some of them might transition out, then we're gonna talk about the students. And I understand there are some initiatives that you're already doing. I would like to see more specific initiative on the curriculums to start incorporating students right away.
So-
Whatever, I don't know what the answer is.
Yep, I think some of the student implication is found in initiative 2. So when you look at our conversion from RTI to MTSS, that's an equity-driven process. The data teams have a component that is academic. There's also a component that's social emotional. So the entry point with the students has been through the ruler and the development of the social emotional toolbox for them. So the EI quotient, which is also embedded in some of the work that we're doing with Michael Eatman around the cultural competency piece. So there's straightforward curriculum that offers a diversity of opinion and outlook on the world. There's social emotional learning through the ruler initiative to help train students to see the world in a more emotionally intelligent manner, articulate their feelings with adults and students, which is underpinned to some of the DEI work. The DEI work right now is truly focused on getting staff at a comfort level where they know what it is, can recognize it, and can be more proactive when dealing with family and students in a culturally appropriate way.
So can you be a little bit more specific about what that means? Because I have 3 kids in 3 different grades. I don't see any. They haven't bring home and tell me, what they learned about culture, about diversity, or anything like that in their regular curriculum.
How does it work? Could I comment here too or anything?
Yep, say point of information.
Okay. So point of information. So Pam, I think I very much agree with Anna that, I don't know, when I read through it, I fully understand that I think it will take 3 years, to run through all the curriculum. Teachers have a limited amount of time to do this type of training and work. I don't see why at the same time they couldn't start maybe implementing some things they pick up in the first 6 months or whatever it might be, unless I'm off base with how this works. So I'm not an educator, so maybe that's not possible to do. I would
It is.
like to think that it would be.
So
It is.
for this, maybe what we could do is take everybody's input on this and then let you
Yeah.
respond at once. Yep.
I think that I understand your point and I agree with you, Anna, in many ways. And I have seen through my own kids and in fact had a really, I think, unique window into it during COVID, as we all did. Seeing what is happening in their classrooms and listening, getting to hear more of the instruction that's going on. And I do recognize that there are some teachers in our district who are already doing this at a very high level. And then I think that there are probably some who are not still. And would I like to see that addressed now? Absolutely. Do I also recognize that it is not our role as a school committee to tell teachers what books they can and cannot teach in their classroom? It's not our job as a school committee to choose the specific curriculum that's being taught. Do I agree with you that I would like my own children learning more about this every day from teachers who are highly trained to do it? Absolutely. But I think from the educator perspective, it's hard to put teachers in a position where we are requiring them to teach a curriculum that they are not trained to deliver. And so that process does take time. And I think that we need to honor that process and at the same time respect the educators who we have hired, who we know are wonderful teachers, and the principals who we have hired who oversee the curriculum that's happening in their at the building level. But I would also, and I encourage you to look at especially the social studies standards that we are required to meet. And what are I'm drawing a blank now, but there are now, is it a DEI standard? What is the new
Cultural competency
cultural competency
or cultural
standards
proficiency?
that are
That'd be the DESI.
statewide that we are required to meet? And so that is happening because it is a requirement for us to meet those standards at some level.
At the very minimum.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think I can solve the problem a little bit. And it may not be
Can we-
a satisfying answer,
Well, hold
But
on,
can
'cause-
can we go through letting everyone say their thing though? I know,
Yeah, but
just
this
because we said we would. I know,
Yeah.
I know. We said we would. I'm sorry. And I can see Jake is eager to say something.
No, it's others first.
Oh, you were the one raising your hand.
I was asking if we could go there. No comment. Okay, then I'll jump in.
Please.
So I agree, this is very passive. I don't hear what impact it's gonna have on students in this. And I think that's in part because I cannot see what the 2-year outcomes are, right? There's the 10-year objectives. But it was very helpful for me, Pam, to hear you say strategic initiative 1 around authentic learning is really establishing foundations. I couldn't get that from this. But now that I know that, I can judge these a little bit better. I had nothing to judge these actions and products or deliverables against. So I actually don't feel comfortable just saying whether or not these are the right things, because I don't know what the outcome is in 2 years. I don't hear that I hear the point that it's mostly teacher focused, which I somewhat understand, but I would hope that there would be some student elements in here, to Anna's point and Chris. So to me, I don't think this is ready until I can better understand what the 2-year outcomes really are, to judge that these actions and deliverables are going to get us to those outcomes.
Anyone else have any question or comment before Pam responds? Thank you for your patience, Pam.
No, it's okay. I would say the outcomes are the objectives as stated, and what is in the action and the deliverable is seeking to get to that objective.
Point of clarification though,
Yeah.
those objectives are 10-year strategic plan objectives.
Okay.
Right, they're
Yep.
directly from the strategic plan.
They are, but my guess will be that the objectives for the district improvement plan evolve in the next 3 years, cycle, but perhaps not. That has been the course, but we can tighten it up. One thing I just want to clarify is this is not a curriculum objective. There is no curriculum implication in this objective. This is a cultural objective, which is why it feels very open-ended.
Which objective are you talking about?
Strategic 3, in creating an inclusive environment.
Yeah, strategic initiative 3.
I was
So-
specifically referring to number 1, just to be clear.
Okay, yeah, so that one is heavy on the people because the people are necessary to evolve to create a more inclusive environment. That's the focus of that one. So there isn't going to be a direct, let's pick this program and implement it as a result of our study. So it is going to be the most open-ended and going to be the most adult-focused, because what we're trying to do is grow the adults and grow their mindset in this area. Okay, so, but that's why there's no curriculum. If we want to set some, if we're looking for curriculum that's running on its whole separate review cycle, and as each curriculum topic comes up for review and alignment with the state standards, we'll go through an equity audit to ensure that what we're delivering is doing so in a way that is culturally sensitive, and meeting the objectives that are stated in the frameworks. So there's a whole curriculum component separate from what this is seeking to do.
I will do one more round and then maybe we can move on to
Sure.
if someone has any other questions about anything else in the dip before we move on. Erica, I haven't heard from you. Go ahead.
Why couldn't there be, and maybe the answer is I'm not allowed to propose something. You know, under objectives, why couldn't we simultaneously, I appreciate your point that we can't be expecting teachers who have been trained to teach science to suddenly start incorporating something different in their curriculum. And I don't think we should be asking them to do that. But to achieve some of the DEI objectives, couldn't we be promoting that through speaker series and things that are done on?
That's what I was gonna say,
So-
too, like assemblies.
For awareness development, and again, I think you'll benefit from a session with Michael, is that it's not a thing you do, it is a mindset that you become and you cultivate. So we can certainly reinforce it and expand exposure to experiences to students. But in creating an inclusive culture, it's not something that can be externally brought in and done to you. It's something that you need to journey as a community together to become.
And a
I'm gonna-
response to that in connection with my.
Yep.
I guess the only I would like to add to that. I have heard from educators in this district, and it makes some sense to me that their goal, their passion is to teach science. And while they fully support DEI objectives, they may not be the best trained, they may not have the right passion to be in the role of educating students in this way, which isn't to say that they shouldn't have the mindset. I think the training is all effective. But I'm looking forward to the conversation with Michael Eaton, because it seems to me that people who are most skilled in this is what they do. They do speak to students, and that is their passion, and that's
Mhm.
something that they can share in a way that, you know, some educators may not be as comfortable doing, and I think that's okay too.
Just a point of clarification, though, DEI is not a subject.
I'm using inevitably I was gonna get myself trapped, but.
No, and I'm very open to feedback, and if you want tighter goals, if you want us to try to articulate something more clearly, very open to that, but I'm gonna push you guys back to your goals and to the strategic plan, because I'm delivering, the team has delivered to you a roadmap for a strategic plan that's heavy on climate and cultural development. That isn't a curriculum. That's making people who may not be comfortable with cultural competency conversations comfortable, because it's been set as a priority by the district to pursue this as part of our growth. I'm not endorsing or not endorsing. I'm just telling you that that's kind of the impetus behind some of this work. I'm happy to bring in people to better explain it than I can. I'm on the journey as well, but this, we really got rocketed out by school committee resolution on anti-racism. I think we need to go back and revisit what that's stating. And to achieve some of those deliverables, yes, you have to take your entire community through an evolution of thinking. And it's not going to be, I'm not going to be able, I don't know how to measure it yet. Part of what we're talking about is, how do you measure this? How do you know that you're making progress? What does this really look like? So, I offer that, and with all sincerity, that this is unknown territory for everybody, but also something we've been set forward to do.
I would like to take my turn to share something, also to share my thought on this.
Well,
Right? Matt and I were the only ones on the committee at the time when that resolution passed. It was right at the beginning of our term. It was right after the George Floyd. It feels like about a decade ago, but it really wasn't. We were part of that committee, and that committee as a whole felt very strongly about this work. It was not something that came about lightly. This came by way of an MASC broadly put out there this resolution wording. I think most districts in the state adopted this resolution as well. At the time, I specifically asked, how often does MASC put out these things for us to adopt? Is this like a frequent thing that we just adopt their stuff? And it was not. It was well considered. It was then followed up in the strategic plan process, where we learned a lot about the priorities and also the current state of where things are in our communities and in our school community, including our teachers, our staff. And with that, I am going to say that, having been part of this process since that day, I am fully in support of trusting that the people who have brought a roadmap to us are giving us the best chance of having this happen. I know what the numbers said during that strategic planning process about our own staff and teacher beliefs systems and our community's belief systems, and to get to a point where both the committee and the communities behind it were attempting to go and have since put forth. This is a roadmap that was brought forth to us. The only thing I'm hearing really is that we're not seeing enough fast enough. I would say, as a committee, do we believe this aligns with the mission? And in that way, I trust the time frame on that. I also think that having Michael come join us is going to be really valuable, so that people can understand what this is and what it isn't. that is my input for this round. Let's take one more round of comment on this particular thing and then let it sit with, they have heard the input and we can ask other questions before taking a vote on whether to approve the debt. Does anyone else, I just want to give more opportunity here. Anna, go ahead. You have a comment or a
I'm
question?
very passionate about this. But I totally get that is not part of the curriculum because some teachers are not just equipped or trained to do that. I totally get that. And I don't think I'm asking for the teacher or to pick specific books on. I do think that it should be a combination of things. We're not doing enough. We really are not doing enough. If you ask me to vote this now, I would not vote for it. It's just not enough. And this is coming from one of the very few minorities in this town. Or the next town too, which we just need to do more. It's all massive. It could be incorporating, for example, when I go to one of my kids, the mystery readers,
Mhm.
when they are teaching about China, when they're teaching about something, I go out of my way to introduce the Chinese culture to the classroom. The teachers bring the other classroom together. So sometimes it's not about specific curriculum. It's about the exposure. It's about the speakers. It is a combination of things. And we need to be more mindful. If anti-racism is that important to this group, we actually need to be very specific to actually write it there, what we're going to do about it. Right now, it's not enough.
All right, so that's me and Anna. Thank you. Anyone else have another comment on this round? Jake, go ahead. I'm going in order. Jake, do you have a comment?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So, 2 and 3. I don't hear anybody arguing against them. I think what we're saying is more would be good. In 2 years, you can do what you can do and you need to lay the foundations. I'm not arguing that at all. I do want to reiterate, I think what is missing is outcomes so that we can determine whether or not these are the right actions and get a sense of what's actually going to be different for teachers and kids.
Okay.
While 2 and 3 are not a curriculum, they're not a subject, they do inform curriculum. And that's what I want to be able to see is how is it going to inform curriculum? And the curriculum review cycle is not totally separate from these. These objectives and these actions should be incorporated into the district review, curriculum review, and vice versa. So for example, when we get to it, but just to look ahead, next year, if we indeed review science and technology engineering, I don't want that to be done without thinking about authentic learning or equity, right?
course.
These have to be tied together. So it would be nice if they were reflected here because they are indeed related. So I think,
Does somebody have a proposal for a document that's better going to show the that obviously is not going to happen in a vacuum or without people's using their professional growth, knowledge, and expertise to analyze those things. I just don't know how to show all of the interconnectedness of everything we do on one document.
well, I think
I'm going to own
purposes
that.
of the
Don't know how to show it to you.
for the purpose of district improvement plan, just in the district actions, include the curriculum review in the district actions. That's a simple way of doing it.
Okay, thank you. Matt, do you have any commentary
On this one, no.
on this in
Something else.
particular? Kate?
I agree that I'm looking forward to hearing from Michael Eatman more about this. I agree with Anna that I think that more could be happening to involve our students and to make sure that they are walking the walk that we are encouraging their teachers to also walk. I think that in addition to getting from Michael an overview of the work that he's doing with the teachers, I think our question for him is what can we do in our role as a school committee to advance student learning in what is under our purview that we can advance right now, while also recognizing that schools don't operate in a vacuum and that this is a community issue as much as we can address it with our students in our schools and our faculty and staff. We can't address what is going on in every home in our community. We can't address what's going on in town meetings. We have no control over that. And so I think that there's also a community outreach that needs to happen here as well.
Thank you, Kate. Erica, do you have anything to add? No. Okay. Chris, do you have anything to add?
I don't think so in general. I mean, I think maybe what I brought up earlier, or maybe some suggestions are sort of outside of the scope of what's here and maybe just separate and different and not necessarily under our purview, but and have no advice on how to better show this or, articulate it in a document, but I would just like to reiterate that, I do think we should try to do as much as we can as quickly as we can.
And
I don't know exactly how that's done. But
Well, you will have a
that's why you
series
get
of,
paid the big bucks. And I do.
you also have a series of school improvement plans coming to show you what's happening at each school in each of these brackets. These are
Yeah.
the big overarching.
that was going to be
Pieces.
my final commentary,
Right.
which is that this isn't in its own, then this leads to the school improvement plans where we will see at the school level what they are actually doing to further each of these as well. What I'm hearing from the group is that we're hoping for more
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah.
What I'm not hearing is the why we aren't. And part of that might be because we haven't been part of the process of this, of working with Michael Eatman and understanding why we need this 3 years and then what the next steps are. And I'm okay with that because that's not our job. And so I think that, again, when we have our opportunity to work with him, we might understand it a bit better. I am comfortable getting the point across that I'm certain the principals will be hearing this too, that we're looking for specificity here and more faster as much as possible, but I am personally not willing to, or not interested in asking to come up with a whole new structure for the district improvement plan on this. I don't think we need to let perfect be the enemy of the good and hold up the entire process on this. That's my input for this. With that, shall we take a vote on the district, or actually, sorry, we have other things. All right, so do we have things other than the DEI connectedness to bring up for this? Yes, Matt.
More about maybe to Avi, maybe. So I know it's a couple other places, but like strategic initiative 1.7, the creativity, innovation in the arts, specifically kind of over to the potential hiring. How are you looking at that from the budget? 'Cause I mean, so we eliminated foreign language because of budget constraints. Is this going to be kind of looked at as equal footing to work, like, if there are once again budget constraints when this becomes, is this going to be looked at as, well, it's a nice to have, but we can't afford it? Or is it going to be, nope, we're going to do this and we're going to make it happen and we'll find, how are you looking at this? Is it similar to the foreign language kind of conversation or is it going to be different?
So if you look at the district actions, it's a reorganization. So we'll look to find money within the program
Okay.
or by reorganizing other coordinator or department chair type roles
Okay.
to draw out potentially another role there, similar to what we did with central office.
Cool. Thanks.
Or it could be built into, if we were to go for an override correction.
So you give you a break.
It could-
Have answer on this.
I was just
It
gonna
could be
say,
built into an override.
yeah, that was gonna be Melanie.
Jake, you had a question?
I was just gonna say, I would encourage us to be open about how that gets done. And this is why I keep going to the community part of the correction conversation. Because if we only think about something like the arts in reorganizing what we currently have, we will never change that. It will never become better. So if we have a broader conversation about what we're looking for, including a more diverse and stronger music and arts program, that should be something we are putting forward as a justification for a correction.
Erica, do you have something?
Yeah, a small question. Under objective number 1, that conducts the level assessments of current practice. Why is it just the elementary review?
Because the high school just completed its NEASC review and the NELMS report was done about 4 or 5 years ago. So the other two levels have had these types of reviews.
Sorry, you did say that. So 4 or 5 years ago is recently, and
It's a
that's where-
10-year cycle typically for NEASC. We've never had one for the elementary ever. In fact, it's a new, NEASC never used to do it. It's a new service that they offer.
Did you have one more?
I'm sorry, this is a very awkward way for me to converse sometimes because I have a follow-up question to that. So how, I don't see here how those assessments are being used.
So we're going to have a set of recommendations out of the assessment, and then we'll draft a plan from there for implementation. There'll be guides pretty much for the principals to craft their plans for improvement, and if anything bubbles up in terms of district level support, we will add that to our plan. I mean, this gets revised regularly over the years. I mean, we're taking a stab at 3 years out of things that we think are going to advance the game based on what we see now. We could get that assessment back and it could send us in a completely different direction than what we're anticipating.
That's a bit of, so I still, what is authentic learning? I don't know. Do I,
That's why we're seeking to define it. It means different, I would say it means different things. to
Organic.
different people.
Fair
Okay.
trade.
I just want to make sure I'm not the only one that has no idea. what
Project-based,
that
instead of taking a pen and paper test as a way of showing your learning about a book that you read, you might do something that's more of an authentic task to
means. No blue
demonstrate.
books in school anymore?
Hmm?
It's no blue books?
Blue books would not be considered authentic.
Oh,
It's more using real world, real life situations to demonstrate knowledge, doing a project-based approach where you're solving a problem instead of,
Okay.
reading the question in the textbook. Active.
I don't know. All my training at work now is all gamified, so.
But deliberately, we define it there because we don't think we have a common definition of it. But a lot of the feedback that we got through strategic planning process was that things needed to be more real world, hands-on, active, authentic. So we're going to seek to define it and then try to build
Okay.
something for it.
Real world authentic.
Kate?
Chris, the example I go back to when I'm thinking about it is, remember when Trish came and presented about how they weren't doing final exams?
Yes.
That is the shift at like a microscopic level. That's my example.
Or use the performing arts as the perfect
Hopefully I'm
example,
still
right?
around
You
when we
study
define
music
it.
all year and you demonstrate your understanding through a concert. You don't write in a blue book about how to play your flute.
Sorry? Last thing.
Was there consideration given to, that makes total sense to me, the flute exhibit, right? But there are certain subjects where it makes a little bit less sense to me, where some traditional approaches to learning might still remain appropriate. Does this strategic initiative suggest that we no longer believe in any?
Point of information, using that example, some of the subjects were indeed still having traditional final exams. Doing some openness. All right.
One last thing. And I encourage that that we are part of the responsible parties for defining authentic learning, because it's gonna have potentially.
No, I don't want to have any part of that.
And potentially the arts, if we look beyond just reorganizing for a board.
I think that that's not something we need to tackle tonight. I'm not comfortable. I think we need to look into purview and such before we try to deal with any of that. It's not our job to do these things. So we need to work through that.
I'm not saying it's our job, I'm saying that we may have a role. That's all.
Okay, so now that we've had lots and lots of input on the dip, let us take a vote. What we are voting currently is yes or no in favor of approving the district improvement plan as it stands for the 3-year cycle that it is, noting that the objectives were previously approved by the entire school committee, and so we're focusing mainly on the actions for the total approval. Do I have a motion to approve the district improvement plan for the 2022 to 25 school year?
Can I ask a clarification? You're asking us to approve the way it is now,
Yes.
even though we know, we just talked about the many things that we probably could have done and more better,
The
more
vote,
specifically.
yes, the vote is to either approve the plan or not approve the plan. If we do not approve the plan, then we would send it back for revision.
Okay.
If we approve the plan, then we are approving the plan.
This is,
So
okay.
moved. Aaron.
Is there a second?
Second, Kate,
Thank you. All in favor of approving the plan as is?
is there any discussion?
Oh, excuse me, discussion.
I think there is.
You think there's discussion?
I'm guessing.
Ms. Hackett.
Well, I mean,
Sit it
that's,
for
I
45 minutes.
I know, but
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of, right, we just made the motion and now it's the formal
Yes.
discussion, and I think that,
If
yeah,
the-
I
if
think
there
that
isn't,
Anna
we don't
makes a
have to
good
have it.
point, right,
Mhm.
that we did all say the things that we might change about it, but am I understanding this correctly, that the objectives have been approved? So we are not voting on the objectives. The objectives are pre-existing and are,
We are
You're
voting
voting
on
on
the
the-
plan in its
The
entirety.
whole thing. I mean, if there's an objective that's offensive to you, we can remove that as well.
We're currently voting on the plan as it stands. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the district improvement? Did you have this further?
No.
I asked.
So in the discussion, do we summarize what we talk about, or that we already did?
I think if we've already said it, let's let it stand, but if there's something further that we need to say, please.
I would just emphasize again, how important it is. I mean, we have people calling the Black kids the N-words now. We have people calling my kids names now. And I cannot say enough how important it is to make conscious effort to make that into our goal, into our plan. It's not only that you actually, to show that we are serious about the anti-racism, whatever that might be, but also to show the community that we care and this is what we want to do. I think, I just want to say that.
Thank you. Anyone else have discussion?
I'll just say, I appreciate everything that's here, and nothing I've said questions what's here. I don't think it's ready, because I don't have the objectives, and I would like to, I don't have a sense of the objectives, and I don't see how this actually translates to what students experience. So to me, this isn't ready.
Point of information, if we vote on the district improvement plan and it does not get approved this evening, does that hold up the school improvement plans?
They're done.
They're done. Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Yes.
Jake, I heard what you wish this plan included, and I appreciate what you're saying, but can you give me an example of what you would want to see in the plan that would satisfy, because I do appreciate at a high level, the goal you're seeking to achieve. I just don't understand how it looks in this.
So in initiative number 1 is about students. Initiative number 3 is about the teacher, specific on DEI. I would like to see in initiative 1, very specific conscious wording on how we're going to incorporate some of the, and I don't know what that means. I don't know what it might look like, is to incorporate, whether some kind of DEI learning, not part of the teaching or books or whatever learning that the form might be, to be part of that specifically, that we're gonna make a objective to do.
Would that be under initiative 3?
Yes, but right now, initiative
Yeah.
3, as Pam mentioned, is all about staff. We're not gonna even get to students till like 3 years out.
Not to be, it's not, I don't want it to sound offensive. The principal's plans are going to deal with the kids because they're at the school level. And that's where this starts to reach into the daily activities and the interactions with students. The district office is removed from that and works to prep the faculty to deliver at the school level. So the thing is tiered, not that it doesn't have it's a more indirect impact on students from my perspective,
So I'm reading,
just as a
I
point
know.
of information.
I'm reading objective 3, build on and expand inclusion and cultural competence training for staff and students. Is your point then that the
actions, the
That's
district's
right.
actions
If you look at
don't get to the
activities.
students. So the objective says that it will get to staff and students. The action only reaches the staff,
That's
and we're
right.
then waiting for years for it to trickle.
That's right.
Point of information, or it's reaching the students through the school improvement plan. And the focus right now at the district level is on the staff, letting the schools work with the students. Jake?
If that's the case, then should we be approving the district and school improvement plans at the same time, or reviewing them at least at the same?
So my commentary on this is that I respectfully submit that, again, some of this might be corrected with literally one cycle of us going through all of this, so that all of our new committee
Don't
members
approve it tonight.
understand.
And wait.
Exactly. That you understand what's coming next, and I understand that you don't yet. There's no way we can impart that, if you're not, if you weren't watching closely for the last year in preparation for, like, if you didn't know you were doing this and pay close attention to these things coming into it, I understand that that's not the case, that you understand already inherently what's coming next. And so that could be, I think that this is an issue of greenness for us as a committee currently that is driving this. So perhaps that might be something that informs our votes moving forward. We do have another item of business here, so I would like to please move the vote on this unless there is something else really extraordinary that needs to be said. Okay. All in favor of approving the district improvement plan for 2022 to 2025 as is, please raise your hand. That's 2. All opposed? That's 5. Motion does not pass. I think you heard the input.
Yep.
Thank you. And so we will get that on the agenda for an upcoming meeting. We'll work that through.
It should be faster once we see some of these.
Yeah, probably bring us back the first in October.
Yeah.
Not the first.
Yeah,
oh,
because-
but-
Yeah, we'll have one in between there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Moving forward, we have Avi's budget update, closing out and beginning.
You know the, well, thank you. Well, yes, shifting along to other topics, typically this time of year, we continue to just provide context as we move forward and get ready for what's going to be happening in the budget cycle, the official budget cycle. And this time, we're starting to just get more information. We try to share it as we move along. We don't have a final 22 report. That typically happens, closer to when we prepare and submit all of our information to the Department of Ed, just because of ongoing accounting entries and journal entries that are happening as we are kind of closing out various things, including federal grants and that sort of thing. But we do have enough information, I would say, for those of you that participated in the first meeting in June, you know that we went through the school committee transfer process where we kind of do a final cleanup of budget allotments between categories to where things shake out by the end of the year. It's a standard procedure. Most districts do that in addition to other budget updates through the year. And when we did that, we did spend quite a bit of time talking about budget to actual, even though it was in a different format, in the form of school committee transfers. This is one step closer. It's very much aligned with that. It has an additional item, which is revenue, because school committee doesn't need to do a budget transfer or any act on the budget for revenue. The revenue and the expense budgets are the same number. That's what a balanced budget is. So we really spent time on the second bullet here, which is general fund expense, and really isn't a lot of change, fortunately, which is good because we like to know that as we're ending in June, we're directionally pretty close to where we're going to be. And we had talked about some savings. That's looking pretty much about where we're going to be. We'll have the final numbers as we get, maybe about one more month to go. And we'll certainly be able to come back. And typically when we do present the first draft of the 2024 budget, it does include very detailed itemized line by line budget to actuals as well. So, so focusing on revenue for a moment, which is the first bullet. Transportation aid is something that the Department of Ed provides to regional school districts on the notion that if you're a regional, you might be transporting kids from a larger catchment area than a typical town. I'm not sure how true that is necessarily because we're a smaller community. Some communities out west in the state are really very far. We still get this. It's a small amount of total revenue that we get. But the state doesn't really provide it typically the final number until the end of the fiscal year. And they haven't even officially posted their numbers, what the official award is. They take the end of year reports that we're going to be submitting in a couple months. They look at the total money available and then they farm it out. So this is not uncommon to be waiting till after June 30th to know where we landed on that. There is a provision in the state law that allows regional school districts to take any award in excess of their budget estimate and transfer it into a 1-year stabilization carry forward. And we have made use of that. It's kind of like a 1-year reserve fund. The reason being that when you don't really know what the state's going to do, it can create some difficulty in planning. So we have $150,000 of excess of the year before it was 91,000. So we did a little bit better there. Part of the reason is that we're having more and more of our expenditures shifting towards reimbursable as we have fewer and fewer proportion of our students who are in the non-reimbursable area, which is less than 1.5 miles. The state doesn't reimburse you for kids who live very close to schools. It kind of defeats the purpose of what they're trying to accomplish. So as more and more of our expenses shifted in that regard, our reimbursements gone up, which is good. So typically we would recommend to transfer that to the stabilization fund. We'd have to spend it in the next year and it essentially becomes an offset to our expense. So you can see where we were last year. If people want to talk about that when we get to the comment section, we can certainly come back to that item. But I would certainly recommend that we do that. We're not requiring that from our budget standpoint. We're not relying on it. It just is helpful, especially when you have expenditures in the current fiscal 23 that might exceed budget. This can be a way to help cushion the blow. I'm thinking, for example, of out-of-district tuitions. By charging some of this money, you would lower your transportation expenditure. You'd have more money available for potentially a budget transfer down the road for out-of-district. As an example. Some of the other areas you can see listed there, I'm not going to really go into them because they're small, but you can see if we did do that move like we've done in the prior years, you'd have about 85,000 available, plus the 100,000 down below, 185. We had estimated $335,000 deficit to be funded by E&D. That would help reduce that down to only needing 150,000, which would be good. It would help us to not use quite as much in the last year as we close out the year. And then COVID, I just wanted to bring this back up just to remind people, we've been talking about how this hits reserves too. We really haven't had a ton of COVID spending in fiscal 22. There's some of it's through the grant programs, but this is for the items that are not reimbursed by federal grants. And so that number is within about 8 to 10% of where we thought it was going to be a year ago. So like I said, the spending is really slowed from the non-reimbursable areas. So that's just an update. That's kind of an item that is going to be hitting our reserves unless there comes like a brand new wave of federal money to say, hey, we know people are still in deficit. Here's some money. We would definitely use that to offset the hit to reserves. Okay, so that's a summary here on 22. I did sales pitch for cubic zirconium. It's a tonight's presentation. No, I'm just kidding. Somebody's mic might be open. But all right, so let's move on to the next slide if we could.
Someone didn't want to pay attention to the budget.
Okay, so because we're talking about reserves, this is just a quick look at where we're at, and we're going fund by fund, and you can see the numbers. So I'm not really going to read them. I think the one thing to remember in school choice is that when we have out-of-district costs for school choice students, we charge them to that fund because they get reimbursed 100% in the subsequent year. So that can create some minor variations that are temporary. But basically, we are in line with what we expected to spend for non-tuition items. Stabilization is one that I think is pretty important to talk about. You may remember from interest income that we've got on the bonds while it was awaiting deployment at the project for Memorial School. We had just under $1 million in stabilization, and we've been gradually using it for our strategic facilities related projects. We ended fiscal 21 with about $500,000, having spent money on the Essex playground, et cetera, as well as some of the technology equalization at Essex. So you can see what we spent in the first half of the bullet, but also for some of those projects, the total amount. So, for example, Essex Tech this year was finishing out a lot of the Promethean board installations at the school to match what we had at Memorial School. And we did start to begin some of the security enhancements that we had presented to school committee, I want to say about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, which included upgrading the camera and swipe card software, which was really original to this building, now 10 years old. You know, if you're in the software industry, you know that a 10-year-old solution for something like that is really not keeping up with what we need. And sure enough, with the Memorial School project, we had a better solution that we put some time into finding. And so we wanted to roll it out to the other buildings. That was something school committee had approved in what I'm calling phase one, reason being that we're going to talk about some phase two security proposals coming up. So you can see we're really getting down to about 390 at year end, and we have a lot of priorities for facilities that are strategic that we've been talking about for many years. So we'll come back to that. E&D, you can see where we ended up with certified E&D excess and deficiencies. That's for regional school districts, the amount of money cumulative that you have of revenue over expense from every year going back. We talked about the $185,000 potential return. That would get added because the 1.58 million already had the Department of Revenue requires you to set aside money to fund future year budget. So right now, for example, we have $520,000 of E&D targeted for the fiscal 23 budget. When we close this fiscal 22 year and go through the E&D process, they're going to say, whatever you have, take away 520 because you've already allocated it for the 23 budget. It's not free and clear. It's got a hold on it. So we had 335,000 held. That's why we got to 1.58 million. We're anticipating roughly $185,000 give back. So that's why we're estimating the 1.23 million, but we're also estimating that the 530 will come out of that number. So that's how you get to the calculation. It's a little complicated. It's basically undoing the old hold and putting back the new hold. Facilities rental, that's one that doesn't change a whole lot from year to year. You can see we had about $23,000 of increase. We've talked for a while now about how we intend to use that for facility improvements, including the turf fields. So that's how you get to the total number, about 11% of the budget. But obviously, looking forward, we know that we have some serious hills to climb. And that's net of the COVID deficit that we talked about. So quick update there. And now let's move into 23. And this is where we go back to stabilization. That's okay. Here's some of the items that we are intending to do in 23. The first 4 bullets are commitments. We actually don't have a signed contract or anything for the boiler. We do believe one of the questions we're looking at is what level of design work from an engineering firm will be necessary to roll that out. And with the Habib study happening now, we're hoping to get their input to figure out what we need to do in terms of putting out a bid for that boiler so we can do it in the upcoming summer. I'm putting it there because we are intending to move that project as fast as we possibly can. And the Habib work is already getting going. We did talk prior to Habib coming on board with GGD, which is the design firm that worked at the Memorial School and did this building. And they came up with a $25,000 proposal for design services, which we thought was potentially excessive. And we knew we weren't going to be able to get it done for this summer anyway. So we felt like this could be a way to make the project a little bit more efficient, especially because we know that the whole building is gonna have to get redone anyway. We're not putting in a 25-year solution. So I'm hopeful that that will turn out to be a good way for us to maximize the efficiency while still moving the project forward quickly. And by the way, I should have said, Jason Waldron, I know, is joining into this meeting, and so there's gonna be he's really leading the way on a lot of these conversations, including looking at the boiler, but all of these projects, he's essentially been the project manager on a lot of them, so I'm gonna give him a chance to kind of weigh in, especially when we get to the bottom half of this slide. So, and thanks, Jason, if you're there, for hanging with us through the presentation so far.
There he is.
Hey, Jason. So the other items, we've already got a contract signed for Gale for the turf design. We have a contract signed for Habib for the facility condition index. That's what that acronym is. And we're hoping to get that report in time for budget season. We're on track to do that. And then the project adventure equalization, if you've been at the school building committee meetings, you know that project adventure is something that we are trying to put in place through the SBC funds at Memorial School, knowing that we already have had for many years a program at Essex. But in doing so, both programs need to be aligned, and there's some changes we found out. For example, that the Essex program is mostly geared towards older students from maybe back in the day when an older cadre of kids were attending Essex Elementary. So this really will help us to get both schools aligned. And Angela Bick has been a big part of making sure from a curricular standpoint that work is done. She's really overseen that proposal work, working with Jason on the facility side. So with all of those projects kind of outlined and identified, that would, if you add the security projects, which are identified currently around 80,000, we could be looking at $80,000 at the end of fiscal 23 for stabilization funds. So again, these are strategic priorities that we've talked about. There's nothing new here or something that hasn't aligned with our long-term multi-year vision. But the items in second half here are not yet adopted. We haven't brought them to school committee previous to today. The ones that we did bring, we've already done. So we wanted to bring them to you. And so Jason can help with this because he's really been the person who's been doing the work of figuring out how we do this. We do have a security team. Pam can maybe describe how that security team works. It's district representatives, but also working with the town security officials. So do you want to say anything about that security team before we kind of get into the items that are on the list?
Why don't you go for it?
Okay, great. And the only other thing I would say is as we went through some of these items, the first one, the gym door, originally I had put it on there because I thought it was part of the envelope and security process. In talking further with Jason, it's really more of a slightly larger maintenance item that we're going to take off of this and put into the regular budget process. So that one I think would be removed, but the others, I think Jason could probably speak to. So before we get to this, any questions on the items we've talked about so far, or should we hold the questions till after?
Let's hold questions till the end. And
Okay.
Till we have a clear idea of what you're presenting, but also what we need to accomplish.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, so Jason, do you want to kind of weigh in on how this list was developed? I know you and I have worked on it quite a bit, but since you've done a lot of the leading on it, I would be happy to turn the mic over. You might not have audio capabilities. Does he need to be unmuted? Try now.
You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm like, how do I get through to them? All right. Thanks, everyone. How is everyone doing today? So I'll quickly kind of go through this list. Thanks, Avi, for giving me the mic. As he mentioned, our gymnasium doors, you know, the building was built quite a while ago, and you know, one of those gym's doors, it's really kind of starting to rust. You know, some of the hardware on the door is starting to go. So that door needs to be replaced. We're constantly, you know, telling Greg, the gym teacher, you know, he kind of knows the trick to lock it, but it's just really getting to a point where that door needs to get replaced. Cameras, we do have a set of cameras. We have about 15, 18 cameras in the building. Last year we added exterior cameras for the first time in that building, but there's some more that we need to do in that building. One more probably for the exterior and a few more in the inside to really get kind of full coverage to the Essex building. Panic buttons. As Maria knows, we have panic buttons at Memorial where we test those out a couple weeks ago. We have a few things to tweak there. We actually do have them at the high school and the middle school. We test those out a couple weeks ago again, but we do not have one at Essex. So again, kind of keeping that building in line with the rest of the schools. Upgrading the alarm system to Essex as well. The door alert, that's one thing that kind of all the principals have been discussing with me. Basically, and you know, obviously you hear some of the stories recently that would alert you via text message or email when a door is open in the building. You could set each door individually. So for example, you don't want to get an alert when the front door opens every 28 seconds. Again, as Maria knows, that front door opens quite a bit. However, you can set a door for say 5 minutes, or you can set the back door at the high school for 30 seconds. So when a kid tries to sneak out, you get an alert. So, and again, if a door is propped open by a delivery or whatnot, it may not go off, but it may go off in 10 minutes. Again, you can individualize each door, but the point being, when a door is propped open inside your particular building. Keying at Essex, right now it's the key system. There's an exterior key. There's various keys, interior keys. There's a classroom key, but the doors in between classrooms, the locker rooms, storage closets or whatnot don't have proper hardware, don't have proper keyware. So it would basically be on one kind of a grand master for that building. So and then again, the exterior keys as well. Right now they're on a different core system. So really trying to get all the keys in that particular building to kind of mirror one another. The Raptor system, we talked about this probably a little over a year ago when it came to Memorial. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's basically a way when a visitor enters the building, and again, Maria, you're just right there, so I'm using you as an example. When a visitor enters the building, when a contractor enters the building, we basically kind of have a paper form. What this would do is you would have that visitor scan their license, and it would do kind of a quick background check on that particular visitor. If everything clears, it would basically print off a name badge with a tag, so that visitor is safe. And once they leave the building, they take that name badge and they scan it to the system again, and then so when the visitor comes in, when they're leaving, and again making sure that that visitor is safe. Because again, right now, and again, as Maria can say, it's basically kind of written, kind of a sheet of paper. So again, just upgrading the safety to the building. And then the wand door at the high school, middle school, we have them at Memorial when the fire alarm or when a panic button goes off. Various doors will close inside the building to kind of keep an intruder from entering sections of the building. So we're looking at doing some of that at the middle school, high school. As you guys kind of know, the high school, middle school is pretty open. So we're looking to, again, if we do, God forbid, have an intruder, that we're able to kind of hit a button and it will close part of the building off, so the intruder cannot get to certain sections of the high school, middle school. So again, that's kind of working with Pam and Avi, kind of our priorities for the building. You can kind of see how we labeled it, and again, just with the idea of making the schools a little safer for everyone.
So thanks, Jason. I guess the only things I would say is, again, I think Jason's done a great job of trying to look across buildings from an equity perspective to kind of have an integrated plan. That's a lot of what the security team does. A lot of this comes from conversations we've had with police and fire partners that we have in the neighboring towns where they work with us. They certainly don't ever say, you know, you need to buy this or that, but they talk about best practice. They tell us what they're seeing in other communities. So I think there's a very good collaboration there. And you could, you know, knowing that we may not be able to do everything, we did try to create some type of a prioritization that's there. I would just say for the Raptor system, that is something that we do have funds potentially available for with the building project still. It was discussed, it didn't go into the specs, that something we could still do. We're trying to get a quote for that sooner than later, so we could propose that to the building committee. It's come up in some conversations here and there, in which case it might be that the remainder cost for the district would not be quite as significant. For example, typically licensing software, you pay a one-time implementation fee, which you might have to do even if you're doing one building, and the expansion to other buildings may not be quite as big. And then I think just the other item on the Wandor here, I mean, part of what it relates to is just the way the configuration of different front doors here. You know, Essex is really a different type of configuration with the box. If you're wondering why we wouldn't consider that there, I think it's really just around the configuration of how the building is versus how the building is here. So those are the proposals, and you know, we are looking to keep things moving, but we also know that this is, you know, funding that is limited. And so I think, why don't we hit the next slide and we can kind of wrap this up before we come back to questions and talking about that proposal. I think it's important to just say, given all of what we're talking about, what does that mean for reserves? Because I know that's the big picture question from a budgetary standpoint that we're kind of constantly trying to be aware of. You'd be heading into the coming budget cycle potentially, because we're forecasting what we might spend in the current year, with $2.9 million, which sounds terrific, but remember, we know we have minimum $1.2 million liability with the turf fields, assuming that we get a 50% match from the town of Manchester, which is a big if. We don't have that sorted out yet. And so that's something that, you know, we're gonna have to work through the facility subcommittee. We've started to have some of those conversations because the facility subcommittee has already started to work on things like, what should the designer be doing? We said, let's have them do 2 fields and then we can kind of at least move forward quickly. We know that the construction might be 1, it might be 2. And so this is kind of teeing up that subject to be really worked out in the next, I would say, a couple of months as we go into the budget cycle. So, and then also we know that the FCI process with the Habib report, you know, could very easily find some near-term findings. When we did the Memorial School and Essex Facility Condition Index with Habib, we did not have anything that was the immediate health and safety. You have to do this right away. A lot of school districts do have those things. It's not uncommon. So I feel like having a really strong facilities team here, they tend to have a very good sense of what the burning priorities are. So I'm not expecting to find those in initial conversations with Habib and associates. They're not aware of any that might come, but TBD. More likely, they're going to say, you're good right now, but here are a couple things that you may only have 2 or 3 years for, and you've got to get that on your plan right away. Boiler would be one we already know. Who knows what the others are? I mean, we've got the old report to go by. There could be some things here. I don't expect them, but I don't know. So I think we just need to know that that's an important item that we need to be waiting for to see how it's going to impact our reserves picture. And then knowing that we have $1 million operating deficit in this past year, things grow right off the bat. You know, between the 1.2 million and the $1 million there, that's $2.2 million right off the bat. So I think you can see from here how starting with what is kind of, you know, in a perfect world, it has you pretty close to the AAA rating, you know, at 11% of your budget in reserves. There's a reason why we're talking about the structural deficit. And so it really is only a matter of time before a really strong situation can become not strong. Our job is to kind of give the multi-year view. to say, and we've been doing that. This is probably the third year we've been talking about a correction. You know, we started talking about it some time ago, so we're certainly, I feel like, been trying to let people know that this is coming. But hopefully this slide, I think, puts it in perspective. So if we hit the next and final slide. Is that the final slide? We have one more? I think.
That's all we had in that. file.
No, this one I hope was in there. 20,
Yeah, it's on there.
this was in there. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep, 23 update. So what's new about the current year? Any assumptions that we didn't know about? This is just a quick informational update. Well, chapter 70 typically gets signed after the fiscal year starts, so you kind of have to do your best guess. We're pretty close. It's, you know, within about, I would say it's about 10%. So actually, I would say 10% overage to the good is better than most years, but it's not a big number. Circuit breaker continues to do well. That's about $110,000 over what we were estimating. We know that the current year, if you look at the budget document, the page that outlines all the different funding sources for out of district, we know that there's a very large expectation of what we'll get for circuit breaker. This additional $110,000 will certainly help. But we're definitely managing how much we'll use and how much we'll carry forward. So, and then so that's some good news. On the expense side, we're pretty close, you know, on a staffing number of, say, $17 million. $100,000 is not an alarming variance. And I feel like typically I have a much better sense of that as we get through October, because we're still bringing on people. People are, you know, some of those things are still changing and you're just trying to go versus your assumptions on budget. You know, we've talked about leaves of absences in the past as an area that can impact budget, and that we're seeing that being the case potentially here as well. Health insurance, we're pretty darn close. We talked about, we had a 10% number in the budget. I think we ended up at 879 or something like that. And so that translates to about $50,000 to the good. We are a little bit over on out of district and transportation. Transportation in particular continues to be high. I think every time I send vouchers to you, I'm kind of, maybe I've stopped for the past 2 or 3 times, but all through last spring and early summer, I was just trying to let you know how that was shaking out. So that shouldn't be a surprise. And then utilities is really a big one where I've identified it before. We were working on with our utilities broker, which is a company called Power Options. They're actually a nonprofit organization. They do a lot of work with higher ed and nonprofit organizations. And they've helped us over the years to lock in supply contracts that are much better than being in the open market with the utility company. They also have helped us to implement a lot of the solar panel projects that we've done over the years. What we talked about, I think back in the spring when we first started identifying this as a problem, shouldn't be very much a surprise. Between inflation and the war, there are a lot of people who are experiencing a lot of pain. I'm sure on the home front, you're probably seeing your utility bills going up as well. We've certainly seen it at the pump. And, you know, basically, it's a natural gas situation. That's what the fuel we have at all of our buildings. So we're past the days of having oil, which is good. And natural gas is really the biggest determinant of electricity pricing. So our 2 major utility inputs are both, you know, fixated on the natural gas market. And basically every bit of natural gas that's there's 2 major factors. One, there's a major supply constraint that's happening prior to the war, with the pace of generation being brought on to the market. But then the second is with the war happening in Ukraine and everything that's happening in Europe, every bit of generation that's happening is going to export to essentially to Europe to make up for what they're not getting from Russia. In terms of our contracts, you know, we have done very well by utilities over the years, and it's been a source of budgetary surplus for many, many years. We did grab great pricing when COVID market hit. We locked in right away, and we kind of scored in terms of getting low pricing. The problem is that we're now renewing not, you know, often great pricing. So we're getting doubly hit. I don't have a very firm number on those items. I'm working with Power Options to come to that. So that's kind of unfolding. And so I will have more information as that picture comes to fruition, but it's certainly an important input. There's that, you know, if people are interested, they're a great source of information about what's happening in the marketplace. If people, you know, want to get into that level of detail, let me know, and I can certainly send you some of the resources that they share with us to constantly, you know, watch the market. So sorry for that longer item on utilities, but given the price there, I thought it'd be worth getting into. And then I think, you know, just in terms of timeline, we typically do get into a much bigger picture forecast when we do our initial set of budget transfers prior to setting the fiscal 24 budget. So we typically try to do transfers ahead of the budget development so that when you're doing the 24 budget, you're going off of a more realistic picture of what 23 is. Again, the 23 total budget won't change. That's been set by town meeting or by school committee, but we will have some shifting between the expense lines to, you know, identify where things will be. So that's it. I know it's a long presentation, especially after a long night, but obviously going into budget season, there's a lot of really important stuff happening. So questions, comments?
Before we have questions, do you need anything from us tonight? Do you need a vote on anything on that return to E&D? Or I mean, is there anything right now that you need from us?
You know, I didn't put a vote on, so I don't know if you even want to do one. I think at some point, a vote of support to transfer the stabilization balance into the transportation excess in there would be good. I think that would be great. If anyone has any concerns, it'd probably be good to know that now. If not, we can just make it part of a closing entry that we do at a subsequent meeting, and we can
Okay.
put it on the budget agenda. I
Okay.
just thought it would be good to present the information first. So
Yes.
the only other thing that people could consider talking about now and voting on or taking up at a future meeting as well is the security updates. And again, in light of how big the big picture items are, I didn't know if people felt comfortable voting tonight, so I did ask Pam to put it on the agenda.
Okay, so here's what we'll do. So I will propose, it is quite late, and we know from past experience, we end up with a level of diminishing returns at a certain point, which tends to be at like 900. We all sort of hit a wall. So I would propose perhaps that we don't take votes tonight on this, so that we have a chance to digest the information if there's nothing holding you up.
That's fine.
Okay, but I do want to give the chance for questions. I know I have a few. So does anybody have questions for Avi based on what he has presented?
Can I just ask a specific one relative to the fields? It said updated pricing. What did we actually vote last meeting for? What was the assumed price last meeting when we approved it, and what is it now?
What did we, I don't think we voted anything to approve a budget.
What was the price given to us when we had that discussion at the last meeting?
You're talking
To
about,
the
the fields, the two fields,
Yeah,
go to the
800K and 400K.
I mean, we started with an initial number way back like 3 years ago, maybe 500,000 per field. And as we've gone through the design process, putting aside our selections, as we've gone through the process of bringing on designers, we've seen that those prices, you know, started getting closer to $600,000 or $700,000. I think you're asking maybe about what we approved with the, you know, shock pad. Is that where you're getting to
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff?
Pad is-
Yeah, these numbers are coming straight off of what Gail is talking
Go to
about
the
now.
next slide.
So these are the latest estimates from Gail. It was on the,
Next slide. Reserves that one. Yeah. next slide.
we had the Gail contract.
It was
There's
800.
800,000.
Yeah, so that
Per
is based
field.
off of their current estimate. They haven't gone out to bid, so they're estimating currently where it could come in.
Right.
And so the only thing we really added last time was the shock pads. In terms of changes, we took the cheapest infill that was available with the crumb rubber. So I think in terms of what we might have voted to your question, it would probably only be that 100,000 for two fields. So you could say that maybe 700,000 would be where we would have been prior to that vote.
So we've already seen a bump of 200,000 before it even goes out to bid, just based on kind of cost escalation.
That's, well, yeah, over the years, that's right, because we haven't had a design.
Over the years, over the past couple of weeks.
No,
I think we might be mixing up numbers.
no, we didn't have an estimate from them that we presented. We just talked about
We only-
what it would cost to do additional. So no, these numbers are coming straight out of Gail's work. So I don't think it's gone up in the past couple of weeks, but we did.
What you're originally talking about, like the long-term like capital plan.
Yeah, it was like
Yes.
500 for field for
Yeah.
a long time.
500,
then
And that was years ago,
600.
that was.
But
as
the
capital.
last meeting, we were talking about 600,000 as that assumed number, and now we're.
Yeah, but it
talking
wasn't a vote, it wasn't a voted number.
Okay, but
Yeah.
that's the number we had on
Yeah.
the table. when-
Yep, this number is coming out of the, yep.
I don't remember 600 ever,
I think,
like years ago.
We carried 1.2 for the combination of the both fields replacement. It started at 500, then it moved up
Yeah.
to 600. It's
But I
just
missed our
the-
last meeting. Anyway,
I don't-
I just want to make sure
so
I'm not.
so I
just
think where
using-
the 600 came from, my recollection was the last time Jason was starting to get, sorry, Jake, to answer your question. So the last time we started to get feelers from Gale was back in around December of about a year ago, when they first told us that supply chain was pushing prior year orders into this summer and that we were going to go into next year. And that was the last time we got a number of around 600,000 directionally. And so that number has been kind of the number we've been talking about until such time that now, as you may remember, they're at about 75% design going into permitting. And so that's where this 800,000, including the shock pad, is coming from. So I hear why it may feel like it's shifting,
get
but
it.
there's really nothing new other than just going through the design process. But yes, it is $200,000. It is quite a noticeable change. So I don't want to,
And
Minimize that.
inflation, if we had done it 3 years ago.
yeah. Good point.
Anyone else have questions?
Real quick, what's facilities rentals again? What's included in
Well,
that?
so when we,
Is that
like
other-
Cape Ann Symphony would be an example, or youth sports on the turf field, or drama programs that are not part of our own drama program, or, School of Dance comes in, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Typically, towns, member communities don't get charged much at all unless we have to open the building special.
All right, I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
So my first one, since we're talking about Brook Street, though, again, plugging that assumption, we are under no commitment to move forward unless we have a commitment from
Correct.
Dimension. Okay, just want to clarify that for everybody here, that we don't move forward unless they're paying for their half as well. That-
A
put that-
portion. We
Right.
don't have a percentage allocation, but yes, they're a portion.
Okay, roughly, sorry, thank you.
Yeah,
They're-
that's
they're-
an assumption that has
they're-
not been accepted by anybody yet.
Okay. And then the other question I
Probably
have,
worth Noting that it is their perception that we are responsible for the maintenance and replacement of the field. Acknowledging that they do owe a contribution, but nothing is, we owe maintenance on them.
Well,
Okay.
just to clarify that one step further,
Mhm.
the regional agreement says that there's a proportional sharing based on use.
That's what I'm
It
thinking.
maybe just what Pam and I have, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what we have talked about a little bit is what will the final agreement be on what the use differential is? And so we are responsible for implementing the project
Mhm.
and getting it done, and they're responsible to pay whatever that share works out to be.
Okay, so then my follow-up question before I even go to my other questions, and you will get a chance to ask the question too, is where are we at in that process of conversation? Because we're moving forward on
Yeah.
Highland, we're hoping to move forward on Brook Street.
Yep, what we talked to the subcommittee about back in the spring meeting, we were kind of prioritizing just getting the design process underway as well as some of the key design items we could go into permitting, such as turf, are we going grass, are we going
Right.
turf, are we going, et cetera. It's kind of the top item right now, and so Jason and I were talking with Cammie a couple of weeks ago. We kind of have, just because the summer projects got
Yeah.
a little bit slowed up, about trying to get our own sense of that, and then having a meeting with our larger group, which has also included town representatives from the Parks and Rec to begin that process. We did have a meeting with the subcommittee some time ago where everyone agreed that we would be trying to work that out in our small group, which is school committee, subcommittee plus town reps.
Yeah.
And then from there, they would have to bring their number back to essentially the board of selectmen, and we would bring our numbers, our assumptions to the school committee.
So
So
our school committee, subcommittee should expect at some point in the near future.
Yes.
That we'll be working on that.
very near future.
Got it. Okay, is this regarding Brook Street before I ask my other question or not so much?
It was, I just, one
Yeah.
follow-up to that, do you have a general estimate of when you think you'll know the answer to this?
About the funding split?
Yeah.
Well, I think our subcommittee could have it by the next subcommittee meeting,
Mhm.
which we just need to schedule.
Do it, yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it'll be, it'll have to go through its own political process on the town side. So, you know, to me, I think this is something we want to get going through the budget process,
Yeah.
because either way, the timeline, which you may remember for the turf field replacement anyway, has bids going out. We could certainly put the bid out regardless. Doesn't keep us, we don't need to know that to put the bid out. But the contracts would be potentially awarded in, I think, the January timeframe. So we would want an answer before we awarded that contract. We could always delay half of the contract for the Brook Street if that process was taking longer, and still get Highland done.
But to get the approvals we need, the approvals are going to be different, I would imagine, between Brook Street and Highland, because Brook Street has additional water concerns and
Permitting.
Concom issues.
Yeah.
So just in terms of like plotting out a timeline, I think it's really important to think about speed and efficiency.
So the timeline that we presented at the last school committee meeting did go through the expectations that Gail has around permitting, which does include their feeling based off preliminary conversations with the Conservation Commission, because I was also stressing about this big time,
Yeah.
knowing how long it took us to do the last project, that it looks like, because it's just a replacement and not a brand new construction process, that it could be a lot faster. And they have had preliminary conversations. They're going to Conservation Commission maybe tonight or tomorrow for a first go through. So if that goes off the rails, you guys will be the first to know.
Okay, and is this about Brook Street?
No.
Since before we move on to the other question, okay, yep.
We're just wondering if this is something that should be referred to, so. This doesn't seem like a conversation.
So I'm gonna respectfully disagree, only in that we are going to pass the work to subcommittee, but this is something that
Okay.
that
But we did say
community-wise
that
we
this
need to
meeting
do.
would be over at 8, instead of our agenda, it's now 9. Says that I need to put to bed, so.
Okay. Yes, Matt.
No, separate question, not Brook Street, on this.
Separate question? Okay, you can ask your question. I have one question also.
And I apologize, I
If
missed
you
this.
need to go, you can.
I missed the specific part about, and I came in, I'm even reluctant to say this out loud in a public meeting, because panic buttons feel like something that shouldn't even be shared publicly.
Mm.
And to me, that's a commentary on the state we live in.
Mm.
Are there areas right now that don't have panic buttons? And can we just get those done? Because I mean, I don't wanna jump protocols, I don't wanna say.
We have, and
something-
so generally just to answer that, on security, Jason and I talked about this, there's a lot about security that we don't get into in public session.
Right.
We felt that item alone could be identified, because we have many ways, Ed, to work with first responders that are expedient and quick.
Right.
So, but that's item
I
on
hate
there.
there to be an area
No,
that,
I think that's a great point, and I just want to let you know, we talked about that before. We thought that identifying that by name would be okay. But going much further, we don't feel comfortable doing in public session.
and do you, I know it's priority 1A, but do you feel like that should be expedited given the sensitive nature of what it should be, what it is?
We're happy to do that if that's people, I mean, we do think that items 1 and 1A should both be done this year, as soon as possible. So I would say yes.
Thank you. My final question is utilities and security being pretty in our face issues right now, nationwide, statewide. Is
Mhm.
there any chatter happening about some support or help? Our state happens to be swimming in excess funds and such right now.
I haven't heard about
Nothing.
that on utilities, so that would make me feel so much
That
better.
would be really nice if schools were getting
It's
considered
pretty
with that
upsetting.
at
This
the
is-
state or federal level.
Meetings haven't really gotten started up yet
Okay,
for the year,
so there could be
but
potentially.
It's not quite the 28% healthcare, but I feel this one's really upsetting.
Yeah,
asked in the spring and there was no interest in that discussion at that point,
okay,
but it's 6 months later, so we'll see.
okay. So if people were feeling so inclined, that might be something they could write to their elected officials
it's a
about.
great
it,
idea.
Elected officials that are not us. Okay, any other questions about the budget information?
Sorry, we went late.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, school committee comment? Any
Thanks, Jason.
comment? Thank you, Jason. Sorry. We've lost our minds here. Thank you, Jason. Anyone have school committee comment? Yes.
I would like to request, or maybe have a discussion, giving me access to some of the financial data, which I know is not precedent, but I would still like to have the ability to review. So I do feel like I can play an important role to help you to, to educate the community and also each other on what the numbers mean. And right now, I feel like I'm running blind.
Thank you for your comment. I'm sure we'll discuss that in subcommittee as well. Anyone else have school committee comment?
I'll just put in another plug to review the schedule.
Yep.
How it relates to everything we're trying to accomplish.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have a school committee comment? My comment is for all of us, keeping in mind again that this is late. This is later than we hope to run. Our preparation, asking as much as we can in advance, getting background info, having conversations with Pam if necessary before a meeting will help us inform this. Some of the stuff we just have to do here, but some of the things really can, getting background info on how and why we implement different things and such, really could cut down on the time we spend at this table. So if we wish to prioritize that, we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. Right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
There's a second.
Second.
You can't do both.
Oh, he-
We're just
Sorry.
First did it first.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstain? Any opposed? Kate abstains. She's
Just sit here
gone.
and stay for the next couple of
Okay. Meeting is adjourned at 9:09 PM.